Hello and welcome to the Nash Tackle Off the Hook podcast. Today's guest, Northern Big Carp bounty hunter Mark Holmes. However, before that, in traditional style, some Nash news. I've brought Tommy Foreman in. Tommy, how are you, mate?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good, mate. Sun is shining.
It's very warm in here, but...
Very warm. And on the subject of sun shining...
Yeah.
Somebody, not me, but you, has had a mega result off the top, haven't they?
I have indeed, yeah. It's been a good couple of weeks.
Talk to us.
So, with regards to, I presume you're talking about the Cy Harris mirror, which I managed to land off the top. A new floater PB, in fact.
Have you caught another 40-pounder off the top in recent times?
Not off the top, no.
But off the deck.
We'll leave that one, shall we? Yeah, it's been a good couple of weeks, and it was topped off. I've had a few fish recently. The floater fishing has finally come good after I never thought it would happen. Normally by now, in usual year, I'd start my floater fishing in as soon as possible, April. I've just caught nothing. Just haven't had them off. It's just been, as everyone's been saying, it's sort of a month behind, aren't we? Weather-wise. And then all of a sudden this hit us and we've got soaring temperatures. Summer is finally here, and I've managed to take advantage of it. With a few good captures for a few different venues, but yeah, it's topped it off.
That's an incredible fish. Like Kingfisher at the best of times isn't easy. Off the top, 40-pounder, and it to be the Cy Harris mirror. That's an incredible piece of.
You couldn't have dreamt it better, really. If there was one of the fish that I really wanted to catch, I want to catch them all, obviously. But if there was one that I had to pick, if you'd have said to me, right, what one do you want to catch? I probably would have said that Cy Harris mirror. It's the biggest mirror in the lake, queen of the lake as such. 46 pounds, slightly down in weight actually. I thought it'd be a bit big. I'm not that I'm grumbling one bit, but new floater PB.
Tactics, tackle?
It was really hard, but so I got down there for the session. On my first 24 hours, I didn't manage to get in one of the swims that I would have preferred. Although the swim that I did end up in, sort of on the lock bank, I had opportunities. They spend a lot of time in there during the day. As soon as that sun gets up, they come in from the middle or wherever they've been spending the night, and they live on their snags on that lock band, real close, and they're in real close as well. And there was chances off the top. I fluffed a couple, but that was purely down to the willow fluff was a nightmare. It's that time of year where the fluff is just everywhere. Not only that, the wind was trickling in towards me, and that makes it hard to not only feed but get a line lay. Do you know what I mean? It's all coming towards you, as opposed to, in an ideal world for floater fishing, you want the wind coming from behind you. You start feeding short.
Keeps your line tight.
Yeah, everything's perfect. Yeah. And it was the complete opposite, and it was a nightmare. However, I was keeping my eye on another couple of swims, and one of them eventually came free where I was seeing these fish, sort of controls the middle area of the lake. And I knew I moved in there basically purely for a float opportunity. I knew I weren't going to catch one off the bottom there. The middle's not been doing bites. All the bites have been coming out the edge or on the floaters. So I moved in that swim purely for an opportunity over the next 2 days of a chance on a floater. And I was in the swim for maybe an hour. My friend Jason was to the left of me. He'd got them going as well. So we were working together to try and not only get a fish feeding, but get the bloody seagulls, fight off the seagulls.
So did you just keep feeding them, feed them
Yeah,
up?
so they were mainly in front of Jay to my left, but they kept creeping over these fish, and I knew that if I just kept feeding and just kept my eye on the ball, an opportunity would come. Lo and behold, it did. The fish crept over in the evening. Few good fish as well. I was fishing at about 60 yards, bolt machine style, so I couldn't quite tell, but I managed to get a few going in the end. And as tricky as Kingfisher is, and riggy they are and fish and whatnot, when it comes to floater fishing, they're actually very catchable. You've just got to get them in your swim. Everything's got to be in your favour, everything's got to align. And when it does, they're very catchable. And the opportunity presented itself. They moved across slightly, a couple of dot spots of floaters. Got 3 or 4 fish competing, and then that was my chance. I knew it, because all through the day I was getting the odd one coming in, but you're never catching them ones. You're very lucky to catch one of them. You need 3 or 4 greedy fish competing, and then all of a sudden they let their guard down, and you can catch one. And these fish would keep creeping over to me, and the wind dropped. I knew this was my time. 4 or 5 fish are in my swim, big uns as well. They're all big uns. Got them feeding. 2 spods of dot spods of mixers, bit of riser pellet. Yeah, a little bit, but not too much. The riser pellet is brilliant. It is absolutely deadly tactic. However, they can easily get preoccupied on the riser pellet, and then it becomes hard to get a bite. So you've always got to get the mix right with a 13mm slicker floaters and a riser pellet and a few normal dog biscuits thrown in there. A bit of variety, you know, because otherwise they just get preoccupied, like I say, on the riser, and it becomes very hard. So get the mix right. The riser pellet's also good. The seagulls don't see it.
Yeah.
That's a bit...
You just said it, mate. That's a good stop. It's a good edit.
Sorry. where we go from it?
I've lost it, mate. I'm going to keep this in the edit, mate. Yeah, that's pretty much what you said.
It's a fucking good tactic. The riser... I'm sorry. Got all excited. I was getting all excited then.
Is it exciting capture?
Yeah.
Hook bait, hook. You're a small hook man, no?
Yeah. Float fishing in particular.
What are you talking? A claw?
Floater claw 12, yeah.
12?
12 barbless.
You got a couple of bits of
bloodworm on it. They're a big 12 though.
And line? Zig flow?
£10, yeah, zig flow. Always. Best float. It's the best hook link I've ever used, mate. That floater not only a main line, but a hook link. Yeah. It's so strong. We obviously do an 8, but I'd never use that on Kingy because of the weed and whatnot. I don't want to be losing them, you know. You might get a better, more bites with a thinner wire, but thinner line, sorry. But I don't want to hook them and lose them. Like, you want to land them. So yeah, but a £10, it's like 50. Do you know what I mean? It's brilliant,
isn't it? Brilliant
hook link. Yeah, no, yeah. So anyway, what I was saying before, I swore, got very excited and saw the fish come into my area. I was 3 or 4 big fish. I finally managed to get more than one fish competing, and then it's easy. Like, cast a bolt machine. One of the biggest mistakes most people make is one fish will start taking, they get a little excited, they cast, they fluff the opportunity. You've got to sit on your hands sometimes. Sometimes there's an instant bite to be had, but other times you've got to sit on your hands.
That's the hardest bit.
Yeah, and it is, because you've got big fish taking mixers and you just got to go, no, and then a few more come in and they're really having it. Now's your chance. Overcast the bolt machine, rods up in the air, slowly reel it over him, and the bite was within 5 seconds, yeah.
What a battle that is, though, I bet.
Yeah, it was a good battle. Not typical big. I knew it was a big one straight away. Not only because I was seeing him take, but you can just tell by the fight. It was one of... I can only imagine what other fish were with it.
Yeah, exactly. Probably that DVD fish that someone's caught off the bottom. This weekend. The old Nash group has been busy with this boy. He's smashing it up on Bluebell.
Yeah, that one was out of the margin. Yeah.
For you, in terms of floater fishing, what would you say? When does your floater fishing gear, go into the van at the start of the year? When do you start putting it in there? Or do you even take it out?
Not really. No, so obviously, you very rarely get the opportunity to use it in the winter, but it's always there, because just like that, 1 minute you're in March and you think, oh, it's chilly. You never in a million years you catch them on a floater, and then just like that, the sun comes out, the fish spend their time in the upper layers, and the zigs and the floaters come into their own. Like I said, this year it's been really hard on the floaters. Yeah. Even with my syndicate down the road here, normally I'd go there of an evening for just a bit of floater fun, you know, a bit of action. Even that's been really difficult. And it's just instead of being April this year, it's taken sort of till May and into June now we're in.
But we've had some consistent warm, steady
weather,
haven't
it's
we?
just game on for it, and I managed to take advantage of it.
Good go, mate. Top 3 floater tips for somebody out there who may or may not be thinking about trying it, may have not done it before, may do a little bit of it. What would be your advice, Ben?
I think I've already said 2 good ones there. One with regards to sitting on your hands.
Yeah.
Don't try not to get too excited and cast the bolt machine into cautious feeding fish and spook it all for you before it's even begun. Sit on your hands, get the fish competing. Like I say, when there's one fish taking a mixer every now and again, you ain't catching him. You might get lucky, but the chances are you're not catching him. You need 3 or 4 fish competing. Well, 50 fish ideally,
100 fish going mental.
And you need to just wait for your time when they're all competing for those mixers. Same as when you're bottom bait fishing, you know, it's easier to catch a fish on a better bait when there's a few feeding. Wait for your turn, wait for your time, always overcast and draw it back onto them. So that'll be probably my biggest tip of all. Another one, the riser pellet's a good one with regards to the seagulls. They're a nightmare, aren't they, on most lakes now. If the seagulls are a real problem, then knock the 13 millers out or the 11 millers, whatever you're using, them dog biscuit, and just try on the riser pellet.
Yeah.
Don't feed too much and get them preoccupied, and then you really need to trim down your hook bait. But yeah, that would be another tip. 3, the hook bait itself. I see so many people with just fish a pop-up, a trim down, the classic trim down pop-up. But the problem is when the fish are really muggy and they're very catchable, they'll take you pop-up, no problem. But when they're a little bit cautious, they've been hammered on the top, a trim down pop-up acts a hell of a lot differently to a mixer, So the slicker floaters are sort of almost semi-buoyant. Obviously they're buoyant because they sit on the surface, but they're not like a pop-up is incredibly buoyant, isn't it? And a cautious fish nosing at a pop-up compared with a soft hook, compared with a feed 30mm slicker floater, like same with a boilie. It's why we fish wafters on the bottom, because they pick up a bottom bait, certain amount of suction, and it's different to a wafter or pop-up. So for these cautious fish, a soft hookable floater that we sell in the pots, they're just beautiful. You might not get as many casts out of them. They won't last on the hook forever because they eventually sink and take on the water. But I'd rather use one of them, get that hook bait as critically balanced as possible to match my feed.
That's the key. I remember I've used sort of a trimmed down pop-up, but I always, as a case in point now, regardless of how sort of excited you are when you see some fish and you just want to get a cast out, I always stick whatever my mix is in the edge, whatever my pop-up is, and just trim the life out of it until it sits at the same level. Yeah. Because you'll find that when you first put it in, even though you think, that's trimmed down, it's like, as you say, it's completely different. You
can try it in a margin. Put your hook bait in a margin on a hook, on your line and everything, so it's good to go. Put a few freebies around it and just swirl your hands around it and you'll see them act so differently. Your hook bait's so static still. Your hook bait's all over the gaff because it's so buoyant. So trim down pop-ups will work, but don't just go bang, bang, bang. Yeah, that'll do.
Attention to detail.
Attention to detail. And then the other thing I only do is I always make sure my hook link is floating. Because of the weight of a hook and your hook bait, you have a tendency for the first sort of 5-6 inches after your hook bait and your hook to sort of sink, and that's not ideal, obviously. So I always use our hook pinpoint grease. Yeah, it comes in a little tub. Just use a bit of that. Make sure it's constantly in between when you're waiting for a cast. Just constantly rubbing my fingers up and down my hook link to make sure it's covered in a grease and a
floaty goodness.
Super buoyant, yeah.
Well, mate, it's worked for you. That's incredible angling. And for everybody else out there, make sure you have a go. I often see a lot of fisheries, people put a couple of spombs of floaters out, the gulls come down, they leave it. But you've persevered there, mate. And if you hadn't of...
It's the same with the zigs, isn't it? Like, people go, I'll put one out on my mod for night. But that's what, like I said to you, that session I went down to King, I weren't really holding out much hope to catch one off the bottom. I was going there purely for a float opportunity. And even if I'm sitting there at night with rods out, there's always a chance, obviously. But, I was there for that. It only takes 1 second with a floater. Yeah.
To be fair, mate, floater fishing at night is an edge.
I'll do it, absolutely, into dark. As long as those fish keep feeding them.
Too right.
And they're very easy to catch because all of a sudden they can't see your hook and they can't see your line. Yeah, they're very catchable at night.
Top angling, Tom, mate. Top little insight there into your floater fishing. I'm going to go and grab Mr. Holmes, not Sherlock, Mark, that is me, and I'll see you again. Cheers, mate.
Thank you.
Mark Holmes, welcome to the Nash Tackle Off the Hook podcast, mate. How are you?
I'm fine, Hassan. It's lovely to see you, and it's nice to be back here.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it?
When you was at school playing with pencils and crayons, I was talking to Kevin down here. That's how long ago it is.
It must be surreal, no?
Yeah, to be fair, it is. I mean, I mentioned to you jokingly offset that I nearly went in the wrong driveway, but I can clearly remember. The one thing I remember about this lovely place is that you've not got a lot of room between the drive and the road that goes past, so you need to be sharp pulling over. You know?
True, mate. No rolling back into
the
road,
rolling back, mate. No rolling back. So it's nice to be back, and it's nice to see that. I don't want people throwing up, but it's nice to see them doing so well.
Yeah, well, massive thank you for coming in. I really appreciate your time. There's loads to talk about, but I'm going to start with what you've been up to recently. You've been fishing, or you've been...
Yeah, I have. To be honest, and I think we'll talk about it later, I've taken on a bit more of an active role with Shimano, but I've always been... All my corporate carping life, so to speak, I've been in a very fortunate position where I've either earned my money or my living money has not depended on fishing.
Right.
And I think that makes a massive difference in how you view what you say, how you say it. People who have to earn a living in the trade, who are younger people such as yourself, I don't care what anybody says. When your wife and family's mortgage and your livelihood depends on something, you can't start effing and jeffing and being controversial about your company and all the rest of it. You can do, but you ain't going to be there very long. So when people say to me, "Oh, I like you, Holmesy, because you say how it is," well, just remember that I can walk away and still have a roof over my head. Some people aren't in that lucky position, and that's why I always cut slack to particularly the younger lads that are in the trade now, because the things have changed, Hassan. If I look back 25, 30 years, and if you get some of the older guys in here, they'll tell you that fishing tackle companies didn't really hire media people. That's what paid consultants did. Now, of course, the pendulum swung, so you've got people whose job is to be employed by the tackle company, but also to represent them on the media front. So you've got guys such as yourself working behind the camera, doing the presentation, and you've got guys also expected to stand in front of the camera and not just portray the company's product, but also try and portray this is how you catch them. And that ain't easy.
No.
We spoke earlier on about, you've had a few lately, Holmesy, blah, blah. Mate, time on access. I keep banging this on. My old mate Phil Gregory from Deep in Syndicate coined that phrase to me years ago, and he was absolutely bang on. And he said in order to constantly catch big fish, you need time and you need access. And I know, I know that some guys will say, but Holmesy, you're probably understating what you catch on. But it's a massive thing, is that time and access.
Holmesy, I know people who've got the same time as you've got, if not a bit more, and the same access, and they don't catch as many, mates. So you're being very, very modest, but I completely take your point. Now, when I was researching you, there's so much to talk about. I sort of sent you a rough plan. We've got an idea, but we're basically going to weave our way through every single little facet that we can of what makes up Mark Holmes and what's gone on in the past. And I'm going to start, because it's close to my heart now that I'm an adopted northerner, with some northern chapters, mate, because obviously you're Yorkshire boy through and through.
Yeah, Bradford lad through and through, mate, yeah. And what a lot of people don't realise is that it's changed now, but for many, many, many years, probably until the turn of the century, we didn't have the amount of big fish that are available in the south of England. So basically what that meant is that any northern angler who wanted to be nationally successful had to travel. So people like Wayne Dunn, people like Mr. Dave Mallin, they went down to places like Raisbury to catch nationally known big fish because they weren't in Wolverhampton or wherever they lived. And Wolverhampton had big fish if you were from Bradford. Bradford had nothing. And the other thing as well, which is important for people to understand, is that in the north, a lot of the waters were predominantly match orientated. And I'm talking before commercials. So what you had is this terminology of a mixed fishery. Now, what a mixed fishery was what it says on the tin. You'd got species, many different types of species. So when I started carp fishing, I would fish a water that had primarily a large indigenous population of roach and perch. Not so much rudd in the north of England, because that was very much a sort of East Anglia southern thing. And there was the odd bream and tench in there, and the odd carp. So I'll give you an example. I would fish a place called Cheladine or Arrow Park, and the northerners will be rolling their eyes now. Tough reservoirs, and typical reservoirs that were almost like country parks, so you'd have people walking round. And if I tell you that at that time, those lakes had a 1 rod limit and no night fishing. Oh, yeah. 1 rod limit, and no night fishing.
What year are we talking here?
We're talking about 1977, 78. I left school in 1978, and the irony of it is, a friend of mine, Neil Moore, who might be listening to this, he was in the same class as me, I were always, let's do this. And we decided to bait up this particular local reservoir for the beginning of the season. It was the days of a close season. And in Yorkshire, we started the 1st of June. Everywhere else started the 16th of June. But in Yorkshire, we started on the 1st of June.
Classic Yorkshire.
Because we finished end of February. Typical Yorkshire.
Yeah,
we're going to do it different.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Why? Because we're from Yorkshire. but it started on the 1st of June. And we baited up this particular swim on this reservoir with luncheon meat, just plain luncheon meat, cubed luncheon meat. And we put pounds and pounds of this luncheon meat into this particular reservoir. And we were literally just left school. And when we turned up on to 1st of June, someone else was fishing in it. And we got out of bed at silly o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's what, so there was no etiquette. There was no, those that were in the know kept things very, very quiet. And I always say this, my boyhood hero was Kevin Clifford, because he was a northerner, but also because nationally we're catching big fish. And what a lot of people don't realise is Kevin, I'm sure he'd say this if he was sat here, Kevin would flip from fish to fish. So he was a very prolific tench angler, very prolific pike angler, roach angler, but also caught a lot of big carp because he was in the syndicate of Redmire. And I don't want to be controversial straight away in this podcast, but anybody who had a ticket for Redmire were going to be nationally recognised, weren't they? So he took me under his wing a little bit. I used to write to him, days of writing, and he'd send me a lovely typed reply back. And I'd literally hang on every word that he wrote to me. And he'd also send me pictures. Lovely. I mean, he didn't know me from Adam.
No.
But I'd write to him and he'd send me 4 or 5 prints back of his pictures. But what I'm getting at, he sent me these pictures back. And one of them was a 30-pound, 2-ounce carp that was basil. The basil. Yes, from Yateley. And it was 30-pound, 2 ounce. So I seized this fish. And Kevin's got a pair of cord trousers on and a woolly jumper before it became popular. Before it became popular, no beard, mind. And he's got this basil in his hands, and it's a fantastic looking fish. So I'm like, what? So I got in touch with him and said, where did you catch that carp? And this is no word of a lie. He said he caught it from a Nottinghamshire gravel pit, and that's how I stumbled on a lake called Bleasby. Which is in Nottinghamshire, because I was trying to find this one. I was searching out this Nottingham, because don't forget, I live in Bradford. Nottinghamshire was like down south. Of course it isn't, but it was miles for me. Yeah. I mean, I had a what was I driving? I had a Bedford GPO van at the time. And I'm not joking, the lights at the front, the indicators at the front were like 2 cigarette ends. There was just some small. And I remember once on the opening day going with me and 2 mates, they were all piled in back, one in front, all gearing. And I'm going down this hill and the brakes went. They didn't know the brakes went. And when people talk about, you pump the brakes, yeah. I'm going down this road on the way to Ripon, puts my foot on brakes, no it's there. So I'm thinking, I better not tell him. And I'm pumping the brakes. Anyway, to cut a long story short, the brakes came on at the last minute. Mind changing down to first helped.
Mate, what a start to the season that is.
But no, so the northern aspect was, what it did was, it made me not a quitter. It made me persistent. You never, ever would have a northern angler of any longevity who's not persistent and stubborn, because you needed to persist. You needed to be persistent and stubborn to catch anything. There were so few and far between. But if you were smart and you were clever, you could apply yourself. And what I loved about carp fishing in the early days was it lended itself to individualism. I'm not going to extol the virtues of how great the good old days were on this podcast, because I think that's doing a disservice to the young guys that are born in it these days, because you can only live in the times that you're in. It really was, it moulded me into the guy that stood the test of time. Because the one thing I know about carp fishing, when people ask me, and I get loads of PMs and questions about stuff, and I always say the most important thing is don't give up. You can only quit once. If I've got any attribute, it's I don't quit.
Yeah.
I was never good at fighting, but they could never finish me off, so I always got up and finished them in the end. Not because I was strong, but I never, ever, ever quit. And it's exactly the same with carp fishing. I never, ever, ever quit. And I heard Dave Levy saying it, but I think it was Jim Matthews where I first heard this expression, and I use it a lot. And I always say that when I target a fish, 3 things will happen. I'll die, it'll die, or I'll catch it.
Yeah.
And it was Jim Matthews, an Essex boy who fished Walthamstow. I don't think Jim's fishing now, but who said that. And that mindset is something that's always stood the test of time. It's waned a little bit because I'm now fishing waters like everybody, where it's not just one target fish.
Yeah.
So whereas you target fish, when I started, would have been a 20, then a 30, then a 40, 50. Now people are fishing waters where there's probably maybe 4 or 5 desirable target fish. There's still the odd water where there's the one target fish. But whenever you fish a water where it's a one target fish, you need to be careful because it plays tricks on your mind. I think you've got some images. I caught a Yorkshire record leather. And funny enough, I've just written a chapter for a book Tim Paisley's done called Every Picture Tells a Story in the Carp site. And there's a picture in there called The Second Yorkshire Leather. And I fished this lake in near Ripon Racecourse. And I caught the Yorkshire record from there in the end. But there was a second leather in there that everybody said had died. And there was a guy called Alex Peters. Name won't mean anything. But in the 80s, Alex was well known. And I saw him on there, and I always thought to myself, why is he on there? If you see someone that hunts big fish and suddenly you see him on a lake, then they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
But the biggest problem you had in Yorkshire is, as I mentioned earlier, there weren't gravel pits as such. These mixed fisheries that I mentioned earlier were like reservoirs, they were like ponds. And what you get when you get ponds and reservoirs and the likes is you lose the visual aspect that lots of the people that were writing at the time, like Jim Gibbinson, like Kevin Maddox, like Andy Little, these people were all talking about places like Savvy and these gravel pits around the Colne Valley and the M25 corridor and all that stuff. We didn't have that in Yorkshire. No. We'd turn up at our lakes, and if you climbed a tree, all you'd see is a really muddy lake because it were predominantly tench and bream that were feeding that would colour the lake, and you had a dozen carp. Because it's changed now, and it's changed because of many reasons. One of the main reasons is predation of the small silvers from gooseanders and from cormorants means that the stock density has reduced. And again, that's been hand in glove. I always smile wryly to myself because I was involved with the Predation Action Group over otters, and I've done a lot of work trying to combat otter predation. But for many years, we were quite happy as carp anglers to let cormorants eat the coarse anglers' roads because they made our carp get bigger by destocking the lake. Yeah. Funnily now, we've got predation with the otter, so it comes around. What goes around comes around. But it's the northern aspect has been something that's always been like a comfy pillar to me.
Yeah.
And when I've fished waters down south, and I predominantly fish a lot of waters down south these days, I do find that I don't feel the struggles the same as in Yorkshire. I mean, I mentioned to you, some of these waters I fish for one rod only. Let me tell you, sometimes I'd turn up, 3:15 in June was like daylight. It wasn't daylight, but on my book it was daylight because you could fish an hour before sunset, before sunrise. So I'd be there at 3:15, cast out. And I come from the Dick Walker era where stealth is everything. So you didn't cast out many times. You cast out once all day and wait for fish. So I'd cast out at 3:15, reeling at 10:30 at night. And I used to fish Dacron. Yeah. I'd reel in the rig and it was tangled. Oh. So you sat there from 3:15 till 10:30 at night with a tangled rig.
Classic.
Oh, mate, I'm not joking.
Resilient Yorkshireman there, mate.
Oh, unbelievable. And then I had the other side because I'd had quite a tough upbringing, childhood. I got no money. I lived in a council flat and I got no money. So I used to fish peanuts and particles. Oh, mate. There's not a carp in the world I can't catch on peanuts. Outstanding bit. Or maize. But I used to use peanuts all over. And then the banned peanuts all over Yorkshire. Because Tim Paisley, bless him, and I think it were Brian Garner and Bill Cotton and Richard Skidmore set up NutriBaits.
Yeah.
So Tim, obviously, with his entry into writing, started writing about the effects that particles could have on carp. Because let's not beat about the bush. If you use the wrong type of peanut, they can be cancerous. But human grade peanuts, not a problem. But the other thing as well is that because they didn't, at that time, there wasn't a company that prepared them for you.
Yeah.
Like now you've got, I don't know, Carbon Baits, Monster Baits, all these particle companies. You didn't have particle companies in them, so you just used to go to the local seed shop and buy 10 kilos of peanuts. And you could literally just pour a kettle and put them in and they'd swell. But what would happen is if they weren't prepared properly, such as boiled properly, then they could swell inside the carp. And that's what caused one or two problems. And so overnight, my cheap I'll catch anything going were banned. And that's how I got into boilie fishing, because I thought, what am I going to do? And I came up with a boilie mix, which just simply was semolina and soya flour and wheat gluten with eggs, so there were no benefit in it at all.
No.
And I made these into boilies, air dried them, and mashed up the particles, and rehydrated the particles in the boilies.
Yeah.
And that was great. But what I also learned, and I always tell people this, if you hydrate something by 100%, so whatever it is, it's this sphere, and you take 100% of the moisture out, when you rehydrate it, you only get about 80% rehydration. You never get the 100%, and it's because it activates within the mix some kind of enzyme reaction. There'll be all the bait buffs now. No, nonsense, nothing. But I'm telling you, this is my opinion, and that's all it can ever be. It activates some enzyme reaction inside the bait, which breaks it down.
Right.
So you will find with rehydrated baits, and here's a little tip for the bait guys: when you rehydrate anything, always tie the bait on. Don't put a needle through it. And secondly, you're not going to get the longevity of it lasting as a fixed unit. So you will get 8 hours and it'll be down to a mush.
Yeah.
But some people like that, because I remember when I started doing them paste wraps and things and various cured baits and stuff, and people would say to me, yeah, but it doesn't last more than 8 hours. And I used to say to people, if you haven't had a bite within an hour, you're doing it wrong, because it's part of a process.
Yeah.
The actual casting of that bait is probably process 6, and the 5 other processes are not touching the water.
The mind of Holmesy.
The mind.
2 things I wanted to touch on here, mate. Yeah. The first thing, I am probably fast forwarding, but the mindset that you have for sort of targeting bigger carp, where did that come from, and has that always been the case? Because you're known as a big carp hunter, yeah? You've seen, it might be that the venue's got 5 or 6 targets in it, but big carp, Holmesy, where did that come from?
Well, it came, as you've said, you can see the analogy, and you can see the chronological order of how that came about. If you're fishing a water that's a mixed fishery, and there's only a dozen carp in there, but they're the biggest fish in the lake, then your mind's already switched to catching the big one.
Yeah.
So because there were plenty of bream and tench and roach to cause me problems, I was totally fixed on those 12. Those 12 were the biggest fish in the lake. Whether they were 11 pound or 18 pound, didn't matter. They were the biggest fish in the lake. And I very quickly realised that I didn't want to catch the most fish. I wanted to catch the biggest fish. And I know this sounds stupid, but those who will have read Rod Hutchinson's, what's the one, is it Casting a Line? Anyway, in Rod Hutchinson's book, he describes Richie McDonald as he couldn't understand how or why, but he had the knack of always catching the big fish. Not the most, but the big fish. And Rod always berated himself that he caught lots of fish, but he never caught the real big ones. That's a trait that has followed me around as well. I've been, I could spend 2.5 hours there telling everybody how great I am and how marvellous and how wonderful I am. But most of it is mindset and drive.
Yeah.
And I just am my mindset always is I'm going to catch the biggest fish in the lake.
I've seen it firsthand, mate. That trip we had a couple of years ago, wherever we went, I was there floater fishing, catching the pasties, having a great time. I was loving it.
Well, I want pasties. Well, there's some lovely fish.
Oh, they were lovely fish.
They
Yeah,
were
let's
lovely
give them
fish.
fair dues. They were lovely fish. But then you set your stall out for the big one, and as we'll come to later, it's come to fruition, mate. So you don't need the numbers, but the special ones are there.
No, and again, I know it sounds daft. It's all about enjoyment and doing what you like. One thing which does still wind me up a little bit is when people use their own edict of rules or their own measurement of achievement and try and judge someone else. You mustn't do that. I got myself into trouble and lots of arguments on and offline when I was editor of Advanced Carp Fishing because I still believe to this day that carp fishing's a broad church and there are many divisions underneath that broad church of carp fishing. You know, the day I go in for a carp match, you can cut my nuts off.
I'll take that as a quote.
Mate, you can. The thought of me being told to stop in this perimeter, the thought of me having to spom out after every fish, the thought of me getting out of bed 9 and 10 times in a night, or probably more, the thought of me helping me mate net a fish when I'm asleep, you're going to laugh at you. I go fishing to relax and enjoy myself. I see so many lads who do that match fishing circuit, and it's just hard graft. Really, really hard graft. So for me, it's not something I'm going. The other thing as well, and I'll throw a bit of the controversy in here early, I find the principles of world champion, England international, hang on a minute, world champion? So you're the best carp angler in all of the world? No, you're not. You've gone in for a competition where some guy's taking some bunts off you and declares you as world champion in some place far flung in Italy or wherever, where you're never probably going to go again, because there's 900 pegs round it, so you can get 900 bits of money for it, and 850 of those pegs are absolute shit. So you've no chance of winning. So you might be world champion, but hey, you're a lucky world champion because you've got him one of the 50 good going pegs. Lads will be going balmy now, but you get me point. And also, it's same with being an England international. What? Hey, it's like me setting up Yorkshire. Yes, I'm representing Yorkshire this evening. I'll have mates in Doncaster and mates in Bradford and mates in Ripon because Yorkshire's a big place going, no, I'm from Yorkshire. No, I'm from Yorkshire. No, I'm from Yorkshire. Yorkshire actually has about 3-4 different accents. So you can see it's a big place. But you get me analogy. So that type of thing I could never understand because for me, being an introvert and being an antisocial sod, carp fishing was a brilliant place for me to find a home. Because I come from an angling background where it was all match fraternity. And match fraternity was gregarious, so they all met together. So generally they controlled the clubs because they had the amount of arms to put up to vote for things. So in the north of England, a lot of clubs are match orientated. Yeah. Now let's go forward and come up to today. The pendulum swung. The majority of people now that are running clubs, doing all the hard graft with clubs, are carp anglers. So carp, I do see a massive key change where carp fishing has become more gregarious and more social, yet there's still the ability for those who want to shy away from that, to be their own man, to go chase fish. It can do that as well. And that's what I love about carp fishing, the fact that it's got such a wide range. And as we spoke about earlier, I get this reputation now for being a guy who speaks to grassroots all the time. I love that. Because to me, that's the lifeblood of the fishing industry. Yeah. We're there to help as many people as possible, catch as many carp as possible, and we've all got the methodology that it's good for the trade. And it is. A growing carp industry, a thriving carp industry, is good for us all. We don't think it is at the time because there's a lot of bums and on seats or people in pegs. But I tell you what, all that does is make guys with money go out and dig holes, build fisheries, put more fish in. And so it's an ever-increasing circle. So the likes of Rob Hales, the likes of Sam Anderson, the likes of Kevin Nash, the likes of Paul Ward, all these people should be applauded because what they're doing is they are providing the masses with what they want. Yeah. And if suddenly the masses wanted, I don't know, catfish again, then you'd see catfish. But that again never got off the ground, you see. I've seen species where people have said, "Oh, this is going to be the new carp." It's happened with barbel. It's happened with catfish, and it's not happened because the one thing that carp have got advantage over them two is it's almost indestructible. Let me tell you, we've all seen and heard these stories, but I've had goldfish when I was a kid that have jumped out at night, and I've gone up in the morning. They've been laid on the living room floor. I picked them up, put them back in the thing, and they've swum off. Yeah. And that's what carp are like. So they can be something that will infuriate you. But I think the important thing is to remember that there's enough different variations of carp fishing for you to find your little niche. And my little niche, Hassan, has always been to catch big ones. And you'll laugh at this next phrase. And that's primarily because I'm idle. And when you're idle, you don't want to do much work. So instead of catching 10 and going, I've won this match, I'll just wait till I get the one bite, and then it's, look at that, lads. Yeah. And then get back in the sleeping bag. But seriously, I'm not a grafter. And I see some of these lads graft. I've got mates of mine who fish some of these lakes I'm on, and 3 hours spomming. I'm sat there, I've done about 14 cups of tea and 2 slices of toast at time. I'm sat there thinking, my God.
Yorkshire tea, though.
Yeah, Yorkshire tea, mate, yeah. Tailors of Harrogate, But, but no, seriously, it's all about finding your own level. And for me, to fish for big carp just fits nicely.
Yeah. Take me back to Ripon Racecourse, the Lever. Talk me through your time on there. First of all, obviously set the scene, because I don't think I've ever laid eyes on the lake. How big are we talking?
Well, it's probably, crikey, it's... Simple answer is I don't know. Probably 20 acres, and it's in the middle of the racecourse. And I'm going to tell you a little story now that's not... It is fishing related, but this just goes... When people talk about doing the right thing and being responsible and being presentable, most of them are boring old farts like me. But if you look back at what we were like when we were younger, we were no shrinking violets. And I'm going to tell you exactly a little story now which personifies that. This particular lake has jet skis on. So the jet skis come on at 9 o'clock and finish at 6:30. So angling wasn't allowed on between 9 o'clock in the morning and 6:30 at night. And also, you had to park your cars in the car park and walk all the way down to the lake.
How long's the walk? What are we talking?
Oh, crikey, I don't know. Probably 15 minutes. It seems long, but probably it needs about 15-minute walk. But anyway, so... What I used to do was I would drive my gear on, dump it, get the car, drive it back, But you'd to be off at 9:15. Well, I used to think, it's like I'll stretch it. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I found if I got in a particular spot where the jet skis didn't come because it was too shallow in the margins, nobody knew I was there. So I used to keep my gear there, and I'd stop all day. I wouldn't fish. I'd just sit and watch the water. So I'd reel in on the premise that if the bailiff came down and said, "You're not supposed to fish from 9:15," I'd say, "Well, I'm not fishing." But I'd have all my gear there ready to be casting out at 6:30. But here's one for you. They always close the lake on race day because this lake's in the middle of the track. Now, this race day was on a Saturday and a Sunday and a Monday. I think it might have been spring bank holiday sort of thing. And I was there on the Friday. And I catches a reasonable fish, and I caught another one. And I thought, I really could do with staying on. I thought, yeah, but the race meeting on. I thought, right, what I'll do is I'll pack up Saturday morning early, go into Ripon Town Centre, do the old market shop, sat in the pub having something to eat, meal and everything, and then come back 7 o'clock at night. Bob's your uncle. Right, what I'll do is and I had a Nash overwrap. Kevin did a canvas overwrap, and I had a brolly, centre polus brolly underneath. So I piled all my gear in this, zipped it down, went off to Ripon. So anyway, I'm shopping around Ripon in WH Smith's and in the market, and then it was about 12 o'clock. I thought, right, I'll go in the boozer now and have something to eat. So I goes in this boozer at Ripon, some sort of Weatherspoons or whatever it was in them days, some Weatherspoons. But anyway, Bernie steak in or something like that. Anyway, it gets in here and, oh yes, I'll have this, this and this. All right, fine, yeah. Telly's on in the corner. And here we are now at Ripon. It's the 12:30 race from Ripon. And the favourite is blah de blah, and the second favourite is blah de blah blah. Yes, and here we go. And they're off. And as they're coming now to the first furlong, you could see me bivvy.
No.
On the TV as they're coming past the fourth furlong. And they're coming past the fourth furlong now, and there's my bivvy. And I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah. So, oh yeah, mate, I'm telling you, got away with it. But what he told me, oh yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is that when people talk about breaking rules and serial rule breakers, there's a difference. These days, people are attuned to rule breaking because there's more carp anglers. People are attuned to the value of carp. All carp anglers will say how carp got moved. Even things like Arthur that was in the Yateley Lake got known as Arthur because he'd half a tail. Because from what I can gather, someone put him in a rucksack and moved him there, and the back tail broke off. You know, so you'd all these sort of things. Because then people had no idea as to the true value of these things. Now, a £20 carp is £600.
Yeah.
You know, a £50 carp, right, is an open check. You know, so that's where things have changed. The internet and Google and all the rest of it has made people aware of the true value of things. So getting away with rule breaking now is a no-no because you tend to get bailiffs and carp anglers that have been there, done that, got the T-shirt. So I'm chairman of a club, and when we have offenders in front of us, I sometimes sit there with a wry smile on my face thinking, if you knew some of the rules I'd broken. I mean, we've probably got 75 rules in the club rule book, and I worked out I've broken them all at various stages in my life. Do you know what I mean? But in them days, it seemed not such a big deal. Now, of course, different ball game. So I do smile wryly sometimes when I see people talking about, you know, oh, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. But that Ripon Risks, I was so lucky because I stumbled on it by accident. I think I told you earlier, I had a Bedford post office van, little post office van, and it broke down. And I used to fish a lake. I had a lake record at a place called Queen Mary's Ponds in Ripon. And I was going there and my van broke down. And anybody who'll know Ripon Racecourse know that the road that goes to Ripon, there's like a big alcove where you can park your cars. So because it had broken down, I pushed it in this alcove. And I pushed it and I saw a lad get out of a car with, I'm going back to the wicker basket and old days.
Oh, yeah.
So I got this wicker basket and this old, and he walked across the road and I collared him. I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to fish the river. So what's the river? He said, it's a river Uwick Bridge or whatever it's called. I said, all right. He says, what? I said, I'm a carp angler. He said, oh, you'd be interested in that lake then? And he pointed and you could just see it through the gap, and that was the lake inside the racecourse. And it was so funny because I walked round there and I said, I saw this guy, Alex Peters, and he kind of disappeared. He wouldn't talk to me, kind of scurried away very quickly. But as soon as I saw him, I thought, yeah, I'm onto that. And I caught some enormous fish for Yorkshire.
How did you approach it? What did you catch?
Well, it was quite a simple lake to work out because there were 2 islands in it. Okay. And I've always said to people, if you fish a lake that is elongated, so you've got a shape like that as opposed to that, so elongated, and you've got 2 islands in it, very quickly I worked out that the 2 islands, the gap in between the 2 islands, and I would say to people, remember this and use this in all your gravel pit fishing. If you've got 2 islands reasonably close together, you can bet your bottom dollar that at one time there was a road connecting them. And that road will be like a plateau or a gravel pit. So when I actually cast the bail head out, it wasn't a bar. People talk about them as being bar.
Yeah.
But they're not bars if they've got a top like that. People call them plateaus, but they're not really plateaus, it's just a road in between. And I found that fishing on there was not getting any bites at all. And then I realised what the carp were doing. And I've sussed this ever since. Carp are 3 things that concern them: security, food, and sex. That's all. If you can tick those boxes off, you'll catch them. Now let's break it down. Food, bait, we'll come on to bait, we can talk about it. Now then, sex, again, spawning, we can talk about that later. Now then, security. What does Holmes mean when he talks about security? It means that they're used to being predated. because they don't arrive at £20. You know, they've gone through their lives looking over the shoulder. Right, and if they're looking over the shoulder and they are predated on, then one thing they look for are fixed points. And what a fixed point is any part of their aquatic environment that is constant. And in a lake, what is constant is the banks and the banks of the island. And also underneath, if you've got steep-sided bars, those bars and those troughs and those stream beds. And what they will do is they will follow them so that they have some kind of protection against one side of them. So that's when you'll see them laid up. That's why margins on islands do so well, because the carp lay up against them, because then they know that danger can only come at them.
Yeah, from one side.
Not behind them.
Yeah.
And so what I very quickly realised was that by fishing on top of the bar, I was getting nothing, because the fish were moving lower down in the deeper water on the side of it. And then, of course, the problem that we had then was trying to get the right bite. I'll give you an example. People talk about dropbacks. You don't hear much about dropbacks these days. But I come from a time when we used to use everything that we had to create as much resistance to the carp. Now, of course, modern technology and rods, a lot of things are done for you. But in those days, we would have to foam up. So you would literally have a piece of sponge in your buttering to keep the line tight, and your bobbin would be at the top, so that when the carp pulled it out, if you had a really heavy bobbin, that extra slack in the line would drop and would be an additional way of keeping pressure. What I do now, I've written about it recently, is I fish at angles. I barbel fish for carp.
Yeah.
So the tip goes round, because I'm a great believer that point of the tip going round helps to set the hook better. Now, don't get me wrong, that's on a semi-fixed or a fixed lead. You would never do it with a running lead.
No.
With a running lead, you point the rod at the lead. But most of these days, we all fish semi-fixed drop-off lead systems. So I always use like a barbel technique. But going back to these days, fishing up to the island, I had an enormous PTFE bobbin and foamed up. And I sat there, I never forget. Came back and I did the Friday night. It'd be about 8 o'clock on the Saturday morning. Oh, I've got to get off soon. 8 o'clock Saturday morning. Just this enormous drop back. Like, boom, straight down. And I don't care what anybody says. When you first get drop backs, it's not the same mentality as a run.
No.
You look at it and you go, it's our drop back. It's our drop back. And of course, so anyway, I hooked this fish, and probably gave me the hardest fight it's ever done. And after 25 minutes, the hook fell out. And in hindsight, oh man, let me tell you, somebody said to me a while ago, and they were right, the pain of losing a fish stays with you far longer than the elation of catching one. And they're true.
So
I can remember all the big ones that I've lost. Can't remember all the big ones that I've caught. I have to think hard. But I can remember verbatim every single big one that I've lost, how it fell off. And it's dreadful. But anyway, this thing dropped off, and I was like, right, you bastard. I'll have these. And that's probably the best thing that could have happened. Because going back to what I said earlier, because I'm not a quitter, if something does me, I can't walk away from it. I cannot. Over my time, I've lost many friends and God knows what, money and all sorts of things by stopping too long on lake, chasing one fish. But I can't walk away. So the daggers were drawn. I thought, right, I've got to go back, and I did. I did a season on there, and I broke the Yorkshire record twice, and.
Was that same fish, that leather that you were talking about earlier? Is that same fish?
No, this particular fish was a fish called split fin, and it was just a fantastic fish. I played it for an hour and 40 minutes.
An hour and 40
yes.
minutes? You're
It's
marling
funny.
fishing, Holmesy. What's
Let me
going on
tell
there?
you, I look back now and people go, you can't have played it for that long. Let me tell you, there's a lad who runs a bait company that I used to be with Jace, and he'll tell you, he was 16 at the time, and I can remember him coming over the top, and he had binoculars on me. I played this fish for hardest fighting fish I've ever hooked, and I've had some big hard fighting fish. I caught it twice. First time I caught it, I played it for an hour and 40 minutes. The second time I caught it, I played it for an hour. And the worst is, the second time I caught it, and this fish was like £29. Second time I caught it, I laid into it because I knew which one it was.
Yeah.
But but don't forget, we're talking about the days of the only line available was £11 Silcast.
Yeah.
You know, I was fishing a Northwestern SSG fiberglass rod, not carbon fiberglass rod. And I had a Mitchell, I couldn't afford a Mitchell 300. I had a Mitchell 324. I'm not joking, mate. Honestly, people used to look at me and think, how can you ever catch it? And I used to get a buzz out of that because I had no money as a kid. I was skint. I mean, tackle was dreadful. It was absolutely awful. But what I loved about it, and I've coined the expression the great leveller, what I've always loved about carp fishing is, no matter how much money you've got, it's your brain. And a young lad, well, look at some of the young lads that are coming up now. They haven't got lots of money and stuff, but they're really intuitive. They're really watching the water. They're good anglers, and they catch them, mate. Because that's all it is, just fishing, you know?
Yeah, they can't see your setup and how much it costs, can they?
No, can they not? No, can they not? And there's some great anglers about now, but there are far more facilities for them than they ever were.
Yeah, it's different times, completely different times.
Oh, yeah.
For you, rig-wise, bait-wise, what did you have your success on there?
Well, like I said, it was predominantly, I was a particle guy because I had no choice, because I got no money. And then this particular time, so we've been going to mid-80s, this particular time, I started buying bird food from Hayth in Cleethorpes. I'd got a mate of mine who had unbelievable when I look back at some of my fishing. I had a mate of mine who had a caravan at Cleethorpes. And when he used to go to caravan with his wife, I used to ask him to nip into waves and buy me some nectar blend and some Robin Red. And one of the biggest realisation problems for me was when Tony Mills told me that Robin Red was a third brown sugar. I was heartbroken. I thought it was some sort of mystical type
magic,
of... But it's a third brown sugar, caraful red, you know, and paprika.
Yeah.
You know, and that was the stuff. But the point I'm getting at is, so I started making my own baits.
Yeah.
And people don't understand now about what that did, because we were all making his own baits. The only company that were making baits at the time, this was before Richwood, the first one I can remember was Crafty Catcher.
Right.
And they had one consultant, which was Andy Little, and they had a Yorkshire one called Jeff Crawford. And Jeff Crawford, non-Northerners won't know his name, but let me tell you, Jeff Crawford was way ahead of his time. People think he's a silly old bugger now because he's old, because we're all old. But let me tell you, Jeff Crawford has forgot more about carp fishing than a lot of people know. And he's, again, one of my heroes. He got a deal with Crafty Catcher. And I never forget, I fished a little pond called Boatyard at Acaster Malbis, which is near York. And it had 320s in, which were enormous for Yorkshire at the time. And in typical Yorkshire style, we called them number 1, number 2, and number 3. bit short of imagination in Yorkshire.
Nice.
And I was fishing there with a mate of mine, and we were fishing peanuts in the margins. And I'd been there since, again, no night fishing. I'd been there since 3:30 in the morning. And about 11 o'clock, Jeff Crawford turns up on the other bank. And I think he's fishing with Les Rogers and Danny Andrews, these York lads. And I'm fishing on this bank with the peanuts. And I'd had one. So I'm like, Bertie Big Ball. Oh, yeah. I think it was about £15. And Jeff Crawford turns up and starts putting bait out. And he's putting all this bait out. And I'm fishing with this lad from Bradford. And he's in this plant pot. What? Look at him. Lunatic. See how much bait he's putting in? What a knob. About an hour later, it started. Bree. Oh, absolutely gobsmacked. Incredible. And that's the first instance I've ever seen of large amounts of bait put in, first one. Let me tell you, I fished Duncan Kay's water in the 90s, and DT Bait Development was a company set up by Dave Thorpe. It was Dave Thorpe. And Dave Thorpe was a big fat lad. And I fished with Dave on Ringsted, and Dave put more bait in when those fish got moved from Duncan's original water, from Mid-Northants out to Ringsted. When they got moved to Ringsted, his first season there, he put bait in. You've never seen the amount of bait, and he was typical secret squirrel. He would only put it out at night.
What quantity are we talking here?
Oh, I put in 50 kilos.
Really?
Oh, hell yeah. And don't forget, in those days, we're going back to 50 kilos that were supplemented with 70 mils of oil per pound bait. Oh, mate, then no wonder why they died. You know, because the amount of oil that we put in baits in those days, unbeknown, and we'd put them in, we'd put stuff like nod oil in. You know, we'd Premier Baits, fish meal. They did a nod oil, did Jeff Bowers, and it was fantastic. I remember once fishing Stapleford. There was only me and 3 other people got a ticket for it. And there were these big commons in there, and Hutchinson always wanted a ticket, and my mate Dave Moore wanted a ticket. He never got a ticket. Anyway, I wangled the ticket. And I'm sat there on this lake, we're near Melton Mowbray, sat in this lake, and that'd have been late 80s, early 90s. And I'm sat there, and one Saturday afternoon, wind's blowing like mad. I'm like, yes, I'm on the box seats here. I'm going to be catching these today. And all of a sudden, the wind dropped. And I'm like, hang on a minute, 2-pace going. Where's this wind coming from? Oh, there's no wind. So I walk round, and there's Jeff Bowers. And he had like a baking tray of baits, ladled with nod oil in, putting them in, but it just flattened the entire surface. But, you know, so to get back to what I was saying, I was making my own baits then. And it was the time, and if Dave Elliott's watching this, or Pete Drennan, he can get Pete to have a look in his drawer. He did a boilie pull, did Pete Drennan, and this is the sign of the times. It was a catapult that you could put one boilie in. So like a little, if you imagine an egg cup cut in half with a little bit on it, that's what it was. It was a boilie pull. And
One at a time, mate.
And that's what we used to, I used to make, I can still remember the numbers. Friday night or Thursday night, preferably Thursday, I'd make a pound mix, and I'd get between 115 and 125 baits out of that pound mix. And that was me all weekend. I'm joking, Hassan.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, we'd put cast out. Oh, I'm on the edge of this area. I'll put 10 out. Are you putting 10 out? I'll put 8 out then. Oh, shit, that's gone over there. Oh, I need another. Oh, I'm joking, mate. It literally, when I think of the tactics we used and what we did, it's amazing we ever caught out. When people say to me, if you could go back, would you go back? No, what the fuck? Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to spend Thursday night getting shouted at?
Pound mix.
Pound mix, bloody sweat pouring out on me, rolling bait. When the amount of... Another one for you. You talk about Bait Brain Holmes. Oh, yes, I've got this stuff. It's brilliant. What is it? It's feather meal. Feather meal? Yes. Don't tell anybody. This is the latest thing. This is for fishing over silkweed. It just rests on there. It's like an early day wafter.
Right.
But we use feather meal. Oh, yes, right, fine enough, yeah. Rolls me 125 baits. Yes, I'm in the money now, lads, yeah. Gets up to Ripon. Oh, yes. Fires 3 out. They all floated. Oh. So I'd made a pound bait, and I not tested them at home. So I got to the lake, and the baits just floated. But that kind of Heath Robinson approach is what happened. Yeah. You see, another thing which people don't realise is we used to use liquids, and we used to use drops and stuff, and we'd use... You know, the intense sweetener that Rod Hutchinson did was 1 mil per pound mix. Well, when you're doing it by yourself, how are you going to distribute that 1 mil?
Yeah.
And this is the thing, put it in the eggs and all that. But even that would, if you imagine a pound mix of powder and the liquid, we didn't have these massive mixers to mix it all about. We had a fork and maybe you had a whisk or something. So without a shadow of a doubt, you didn't get over the whole mix, all the ingredients being split accordingly. So if you had, say, 125 baits, you might have 20 that would float, because there was too much of a particular powder in there. I mean, the one that people don't use now, but I used to use sodium casonate. And sodium casonate would make a bait very light. So if you wanted one that sank very slowly, you could put there. But what we used to do was I didn't work specifically on my hookbaits in them days. I worked on the mix as a whole.
Yeah.
So
you'd have pretty much the same, well, obviously there's inconsistencies within the mix as we talked about, but you would just use the same as what your pound mix was on the hook.
We did, and where the difference was, where I got really excited and where people used to get really excited was if they had a new flavour. Mm-hmm. Now don't forget, I'm just going to quickly mention, the early flavours were synthetic. And most of the flavours that they use in the 80s and 90s were synthetic flavours. Now it's changed where a lot of baits are being made and there's no synthetic flavouring. The flavouring comes from the natural ingredients. So you start to use krill. Well, there's an inherent flavour from that krill. There's an inherent smell from that krill. In my days in the 80s, we'd use predominantly milk protein, and in order to get a fishy smell, we wouldn't put fishy powders in there. We'd put a synthetic fish flavour. And I can remember, I spoke earlier about it, I used to use a flavour called Topper, which Rod Hutchinson did, which was like a fruit flavour. And then I went over to, he had a shop at Louth, and I went over to the shop at Louth one time, and he gave me this bottle of stuff, and he said, he says, don't tell anybody about this. He said, but I'm going to release this in a couple of years. I said, what is it? And he called it Pucker Salmon. And it was the early Pucker Salmon. And I caught shitloads of fish. But the point was, we were all sniffers. Not sniffers as in the sense of these days. We won't go into that. We were all sniffers of, it smells of peanut. It smells. We didn't realise the key change to me, and I berated him earlier when I said that Tim and Bill and that stopped me using particles. But when NutriBaits came on the scene and they started using oils, that was a key change to me, because suddenly I was starting to use things that weren't synthetic, where it actually had a inherent taste the same as the smell. So historically we'd used a strawberry flavour. Ooh, that smells of strawberry. What? Don't taste of strawberry. Suddenly people were starting to use oils that had an inherent taste as well as smell. And then of course came palatants. Yeah. So people started to use palatants where there was specific taste. And that suddenly then became a different ball game. And it started to change emphasis. And I've changed, my bait philosophy has changed over the years, because like all things, what you thought was right when you're 20, you don't think's right when you're 50. And as I've caught more and more fish and I look back, there are certain things that I've changed now, and certain things that I've changed my opinion. I was very much into the HMV process in the early days, thinking that they could evaluate it. And it wasn't till there were cyprinid studies by lab technicians who found they could only absorb 33% of protein. We were trying to concoct baits. The older guys will tell you, we were trying to do 90% protein baits, costing us an absolute arm and a leg. Yeah. But that's because we thought that that's what they sourced out. To be fair now, I think I've said it earlier, and I hope I get accredited with this. I probably won't do, but it's opiates that are in milk proteins that are the key to it, because carp are addicted to the opiates from the milk protein. And you only have to prove this by seeing any animal that takes its mother's milk has to be weaned off it. And why does it have to be weaned off it? Because the opiates that are in the milk are what addicts it to, what makes it addictive. Milk. And that's why when we pre-baited with milk protein baits, the results got better and better and better. They didn't like them, they just got addicted to them.
Yeah, they're addicted.
Because of the opiates. If you look what's in milk, there's opiates in it. So that's why animals have to be weaned off them, because they're addicted to it. And
yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's why. But because of the cost of caseinate and lactalbumins and things that are derivatives from milk, a lot of them ingredients have been pushed to one side in carp fishing. So we've got seafood baits, we've got fish meal baits in there that don't have as much milk proteins in there because of the cost. You've only got to see, bless him, Kevin's key bait, superb bait, but could never get the market traction because of the price, because anglers couldn't see further than the nose. You know, this bait that Kevin were knocking out, I forget what it was, like 17, 18 quid. Outstanding bait. But people were used to paying 9 quid.
Yeah.
But when you explain to them, look, you're going to catch better fish with this 17 quid one. No. If it's disposable, like a packet of hooks or a bag of bait, people are more price conscious than they are of a motorised barra or a big bivvy or rods and reels. They'll think about spending the dough on and looking good and stuff like that. But the real important things, they turn the nose up at. You know?
Yeah, I get you completely. So many. I feel like I need a notebook when I'm listening to you at Holmesy, mate. I've gauged a lot, even from that few minutes.
But if you think about, if you look at what the individual milk proteins are in carp baits historically, then look at the genetic makeup and chemical makeup of those baits, and you see the amount of opiates that are in it, then you can start to make the analogy. Why would something, the results get better and better and better and better? It's like the smackhead on the corner. In order to get the buzz that he wants, he needs to keep taking it.
He's got to feed the habit.
He's got to get more and more. And that's why the results got better and better and better. Because we weaned them onto milk baits and they were weaned onto the opiates.
Opiates, unbelievable.
Holmes' opinion. How else can they, you mean to tell me, how else can they really evaluate protein content? What a lot of tosh. But I really believed it at that time because the result showed it.
Yeah.
You know?
You were catching.
Now, when I look at the results from an addictive principle, different ballgame. And it's silly because I should have realised that. Because if you look at mass seeds, things like hemp, things like red dairy seeds, if you get carp on mass particles, they will get addicted to them and they will hunt them out before anything else. Well, it's exact that, and that's the holy grail to me. And that's why pre-baiting always works. Because if you can get a fish looking for your bait first, then it's easy to catch. And that's why I work so hard on the bait aspect. Because if you look at some great technical anglers out there that zig fish and are using, the tramline job 3 on a spot and all the rest of it, they are superb at bringing a collection of fish together. When you bring a collection of fish together, they're easy to catch. One fish on its own, different ball game. Different ball game.
Yeah.
And this is what I always say to people when people say, how do you catch? You mentioned earlier, how do you catch the big ones, Holmesy? By keeping away from the small ones. And I've always likened it to watching a group of cows in a field. Carp are a grazing animal, and I think I said this to you when we did the live feed with AD. Carp are a grazing animal. So you watch a grazing animal like a group of cows, and in a field there'll be a collection of them that all feed together. But there'll be 1 or 2 on their own. And the 1 or 2 that are on their own are individual and they don't want to share. And in a fishing situation, those are the big fish. They will keep away from the group for a whole host of reasons. And one of them is caution. And then they've got the other aspect, they don't want to share. And that's why sometimes you've got 2 attacks. The most cautious fish in the lake can be the smallest because he don't want to get stuck into bait because he's wary, so he's going to put a lot of bait on. And then you've got the big fish in the lake that sometimes takes well, if I get caught 4 times, but I'm getting stuck into all this bait, that'll do for me. So that's sometimes why you'll see, and they've got that tag, the mug. It's because they've crossed over the bridge and thought, you know what? The gain's worth the pain. Yeah. I'm going to get stuck into this. Whereas you'll have a little common male somewhere that is just an absolute, or a koi or something like that. Never caught. Yeah. Because they abstain. And when you get certain fish that are never caught, I always say to people, get loads of PMs from people. Oh, I'm saying this common never gets caught. And I'll say, it's not eating what you're giving it. End of. You have to change what you're trying to catch it with. It doesn't eat boilies. If you don't eat boilies, and you're fishing boilies, you ain't going to catch it, are you? And I learned that's why I came up with the deadbait thing. Because there are certain fish that just do not eat boilies. And as much as we want to try and condition them and say, no, that's a nonsense, I am telling you, there are some carp out there that do not eat the angler's baits. And this is the key to me. When you fish a water that's not heavily fished, you realise that point even more. And I realised it when I fished the Maxi Caravan Park Lake. When you're on a water like Linear or Bluebell or wherever, Willows or wherever, that sees a lot of angler pressure, the carp are conditioned to know that little round balls are food. You go on a water, well, there's only 5 members and it's 50 acres, brilliant. They don't need your bait. So you have to spend a lot of time priming them, getting them ready on your bait. And if you read the old books like Stillwater Angling by Richard Walker and 1 or 2 other people, Jack Hilton and Frank Gutfield was an old guy I used to read. They spent months pre-baiting in order that they could get a bite from carp, because before the pre-baiting, the carp just ate naturals. Yeah. And trying to put a bloodworm on a size 4 hook ain't going to happen. So what's happened is that we've got a stage where carp are in waters which are predominantly carp. They're getting people fishing for them who are just carp fishing. So that becomes the norm. Those round balls become the norm. Now suddenly you go on to bigger waters where there's not as many anglers. They don't need our baits. So that's why when people say, I've seen these fish and I can't catch them, it's because they're not feeding on our baits. And that's why you need to work hard to get them hooked on your baits. But by the same token, you can do things to your bait, and this is why I mess around with my baits. You can do things to your bait which are individualistic, and that will give you first dabs on the best results. Otherwise, remember James Harrison telling me, he said, otherwise it's a lottery, Holmes. It's like spinning the wheel every weekend. Who's going to catch the box common this weekend?
Right, Holmesy. We were going to do bait section later, but we've got to do it now because we're here and you've got my brain moving. Yeah. You said there are things you can do to sort of individualise or single out fish, like you're saying, that are going uncaught. So you might fish a water. There's a couple of big commons that you see, haven't been out for 4 or 5 years. People think they're dead or whatever. Talk to me about your mind, how you approach that aspect in terms of singling out the bigger fish or the fish that you want.
Well, the one thing I would say, and I always say this to people, is, and it's difficult in the world we live in, is don't tell me anything.
Okay.
I find it very difficult when I walk on a lake and someone says to me before I've got my rods out of the car, 24 wraps up to the lime tree. Because I never forget, you'll laugh at this, I mentioned it earlier about this maxi caravan park, a real golden ticket for that linear, and when I got the ticket, I didn't fish it for 2 or 3 years, and one of my best mates, Dave Moore, told me, he said, are you not going to bother fishing it? I said, yeah, but I'll fish it later. And he said, all right. He said, when you do fish it, he said, get in the secret. That's the name of it. He said, get in the secret. He said, 21 wraps on the stone up to the tree. I said, Dave, don't tell me. So I goes fishing, gets in this secret, sets up my traps by finding my own spots. Day and a half in, I had a bite. Well, you know what I'm going to say to you? Right, I'll get on them paving stones, I'll put 21 wraps and I'll cast at tree, what Dave told me. Half an hour later, off it rattled. And I didn't feel any sense of achievement.
No?
Because it was Dave who told me what to do.
Yeah.
But if you mirror that across all of the country, everyone now talks about so many. There's such a plethora of information freely given to you by people trying to help you.
Yeah.
But the relevance of this to what question you asked me about catching ones that don't get caught very often is that I don't want to know information that someone else has given me who hasn't caught that fish, because it's of no use to me. I need to go in with a blank piece of paper and a blank mind. I don't want any information at all. And this is the reason why the new kid on the lake empties it every time, because he's not cluttered by history. If you've had 8 years on a lake and in year 1 to year 6 you've used a fish meal boilie, casting up to the boards or casting up to the weeds, in year 7 and 8 you're struggling. What do? You keep reverting back to year 1 and 6 successes.
Yeah.
So history is pulling you back.
Yeah.
Now along comes matey who's never seen a lake in year 7 and 8, and he's got a blank canvas.
Yeah.
And it's that. So what you need to do is you need to do one of two things. You need to be a complete bounty hunter, catch your target fish and do one and keep moving on. Or you need to keep experimenting. Now, my life at the moment is very good for me because I can develop baits and keep it fresh. Because my biggest problem is getting on waters. As you get old and all the rest, it's hard to get on the water. But to go back to your question, what I would do first and foremost is I would spend as much time on the lake as I possibly could. Once I'd actually seen the fish in the water for a while, then I'd start to get an idea of how I would go about catching it. If it's a loner, then I would have 3 points of attack. I would first of all want to find out if it was a male. And if it was a male fish and a common, because I do believe that commons are genetically wired different to mirrors. I do. I think there's a certain wild aspect in them, particularly if they're male, where they're not as easily imprinted as mirror carp. I do believe that. I think that they are more akin to doing natural things, and males in particular. So you can bait up a particular spot for a male carp, and it'll be going there to feed on your baits, and suddenly a shoal of fry will go past, and it does one, starts chasing these fry.
Is this something you've observed, and this is where that dead baiting approach?
Oh, that's exactly where it came from. Absolutely, exactly.
Where did you see all that then? I remember you talking about it before.
Well, I've been very, very lucky. Is in that right, here we go. I'd been very lucky. I managed to get on a water that I shouldn't have got on. That was an RSPB water in North Yorkshire, and I bribed one of the guys that was a security guard on there, like a bailiff fella.
What did he go for? What, couple of kilo boilie?
Yeah, it was this was in the 80s. It was bottles of whiskey and stuff.
Oh, nice.
The best I ever did was when I worked at DHP. I bribed a security guard $5,000.
$5,000, is that the most you've paid?
The most I paid, $5,000, and there's an hole in the fence, and he'd let me in through the fence, and he'd look after he'd stored my gear in his security hut.
That's a good $5,000.
It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad because it was a ski lake. There was no fishing allowed on it.
I know where that is.
Yeah. It was a ski lake, and I did really well there, and I had a £50 common out of there. I showed you the pictures.
You showed me that.
Yeah.
I walked that lake as a kid.
Yeah, I know, mate. I know. So, I think I told you I saw about 18 fish, and I caught 16 of them, and the smallest was 38, and the biggest was 50. You know, I was very, very lucky. But getting off the point, I first came across using deadbaits in this particular water because I was up a tree and I was watching two commons eating roach fry, and they weren't small roach fry. They were like this. And I bought a fish tank. They're not so popular these days, but in the 70s and 80s, everybody had a fish tank. And I had a fish tank, and I had things like black mollies in there and guppies, and they were live bearing fish. So they didn't lay eggs, they laid live fish. And you had to put them in like a little cage where the little live fish went. And I had a koi carp that I'd got from some bloody circus or somewhere or something. Anyway, cut a long story short, I put this koi carp in, and after 3 weeks, there wasn't a guppy or a black molly left. It ate them all.
Smashed them all.
And it was only like the koi carp was about this big, and the black mollies and guppies were about that big. So it had eaten them all. So I kind of was wired up to that. But when I saw these two commons doing this, and I started catching them on deadbaits.
What rig?
From then.
What rig? How do you mount?
In them days, on this particular RSPB place, it was free line under rod tape.
Was it?
Yeah.
Just literally a hook straight through the lip and then out?
No.
Oh, go on then.
I hooked them then because I could lower it down from the tree. I hooked them in the back. So imagine if fish is like that. I hooked it there and just lowered the fish down.
Dead or alive?
Dead. Just lowered it down. As I lowered it down, they took it and ate them. And then I developed this paperclip thing that you've seen, which I've done.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that the thing that I must stress to this is it is a tactic that can be used like any other tactic. It's not a tactic that you would use and not use anything else because your results will be poor. It's a little bit like floater fishing in February. You wouldn't do it. Well, you wouldn't do the deadbait trick when they weren't herding deadbaits, live fish rather, when they weren't herding live fish. So most of the times when I've had good catches on there, it's when I've seen a particular fish herding small fish into a corner. You tend to get it on the northeast bank because that's the bank that gets the southwesterly winds. And what they'll do is you'll get one, maybe two fish, and they'll herd them into a corner of the lake, and then they'll thrash into them. And
That's mad to see that.
Oh, mate, let me tell you, and very much like perch, once a carp bridges the gap and starts eating fish, they can eat fish almost to the exclusivity of anything else, if there's enough supply. If you think about it realistically, very much like an insect, it's something within the water column that they'll take. And that's not groundbreaking. You know, people have been catching carp on deadbaits, on spinners for years and years and years.
Definitely.
You know, but when I explained that it's just like a floater tactic, you know, and I've caught probably, let me think, 550s on it.
550 pounders on it.
£50.
All commons.
Oh no. Just one common and four.
And four
big
mirrors.
males. Yeah. All males, though.
All males.
Yeah.
And for you, when you said, obviously, there's got to be a supply, so they've got to be inherent, you wouldn't use that tactic if there wasn't fry and they weren't naturally feeding on fry.
No.
But if you've got a venue whereby you can see it and they're feeding, is there a specific window in time which that is? Because they talk about big commons and big moons.
Yeah.
Do you think there's anything specific around timings as to when they switch to that sort of food, or is it just to do with what's available?
It's just to do with what's available, and campaign fishing, as I call it, is to do with when hunger takes over caution.
Right. Yeah.
If you're on a water that's pressured, invariably they're constantly on the guard. However, like human beings, when hunger takes over caution, they're on it. I never forget something Richard McDonald told me when I went to. He'd not been in the press for years and years, and we did some stuff in angling, in advanced carp fishing with him. And he told me his biggest regret was losing his ticket at Redmire. And when we talked about his adventures on Redmire, he said to me, he said, Mark, he said, people talk about how cautious these Redmire fish were. He said, but I've had instances where there'd be a big common, literally 2 foot from the bank, with its head down and tail up feeding. He said, and I would be jumping up and down on the bank, waving my arms, and it didn't give a chuff. It would still feed. When they're in that mode, that's when. And this is why, as we said earlier, if you're sat grafting in an office somewhere and they're in that mode, then you're not going to reap the benefits. If you're a bank tramp, you're in the money. And so that's why, it's all about making sure you're there at the correct time. And it's funny you should say that about a window of opportunity. Where the experience come and where the nous comes from is understanding when that window of opportunity is. And that's what set people apart. But one thing I would say to all the viewers and listeners out there is that they don't not feed. So if you see them and they're not getting caught, they're not abstaining from food. You're just not using what they want to eat. So you have to have a clear look at your bait and say, I need to throw this in the bin because it's not catching me the fish that I want. Then you start from scratch. And that's what people find really difficult to do.
Yeah, that's such an open mind.
You think about if you've got 20 blokes around the lake and they're all fishing boilies or particles and there's 2 or 3 big fish that never get caught, why? There's a reason in there. They're not feeding on what you're giving them.
Yeah.
So change it.
Yeah.
But we don't.
But it's learning that, isn't it?
It's learning that because you can spend 3 years with the indicator going, with every other fish going.
That's such a nice comfort to have, isn't it?
It is a nice comfort to have. But like I said earlier, if you're in a privileged position where you can actually watch your target, then you can start to build up a picture of how it feeds. I mean, I've written and spoken for years now about the underslung mouth thing, and people are now starting to acknowledge that it does matter. When you actually see some fish, they're underslung mouth. And the analogy that I give, which I've given for years, is absolutely perfect. We have 95% of anglers now who are using carp hooks upside down. So they're not laid on the bottom, they're like that, with the bait directly above, where it's a German rig, where it's an inch stiff rig, where it's a simple pop-up.
Yeah.
So the hook is upside down. So what that basically means is that part of the mouth is what's targeted.
Yeah.
No longer this part of the mouth.
No.
The jowl, so it's this bit. Now, if you imagine a carp's mouth is like that, this is easy analogy. Get your big finger and your ring finger, and that's a carp's mouth. Oh, yeah, fine. Yeah. So what happens is the carp bends down to pick the bait, picks it up, and the hook catches in this.
Yeah.
Now then, when you get an underslung mouth, this is what a carp's mouth's like that. That's your ring finger, that's your little finger. So along comes Mr. Carp, bends down, picks it up, and it just skims his lip. See? It's underslung. So you need to be hooking him here. You hook him in the scissors, so you need to think, has my quarry got an underslung mouth? And if it's got an underslung mouth, then you have to think about the rig that you're going to catch it on. And I give you an example. I was playing a fish recently about, what were we in? June. So I was playing a fish in end of April, early May. Yeah, end of April, early May. Big fish. Oh, I've got a big one here. Yeah. And it was weird. I think I'm slightly autistic because I count all the time. I count how many runs I've had and how many I've converted. So if I was in here and I was waiting for somebody, I'd count these bricks on the wall. That's the way my brain works.
Okay.
It's a very analytical type of brain. And I'd done 20 runs and landed 20 fish. Right? And
Good
this,
going.
yeah, and this had gone on, I think, from last year I had something like 43 runs and landed 41. I count how many, and I tried to keep myself busy. So I had this 21st run. Oh, yeah, bang, it's this big, and I mean a big fish. Worst is a big one. Played for 20 minutes, hook dropped out. Mortified, absolutely mortified. Reels in, and it was on an inch stiff rig, but it was a conventional, it was a PB size 4 chod hook. So you've got the outturned eye, whipped on D and that. And I looked at the angle of the hook and I thought, no, that's not right. So I changed the angle of the hook. And what I did was I got a PBKD hook, which is a really sharp point, but I got it so that I could bend it inward with the thick mono, so the hook was actually like that. So the hook was at an angle. So instead of the hook coming up like that and the bait, it came up and went sideways and came up. So it almost looked like a circle hook.
Yeah.
And I've used circle hooks. I never write about using circle hooks or showing people how to use circle hooks because you'd get certain fishing managers, oh, it's terrible, it's not. But in the hands of an inexperienced angler, you would think, well, how's that work? But anyway, to get back, by putting on a different hook pattern and changing the angle of the hook and how I whipped it on, it changed direction. Since then, touch wood, I think I've had.
So essentially, you've got the hook laying, if you like, sort of, almost like parallel to the bottom, the shank, rather than upright.
What I will do when I get home is I will send you 2 pictures.
Go on.
For you to show the guys.
Insert picture.
One will be the conventional one.
Yeah.
And the second one will be how I changed it.
So it's still a pop-up rig.
Still a pop-up rig.
Change the alignment, and that is to suit a fish with an underslung mouth.
Yeah, so it catches in the side.
So you're actually, instead of everybody, and we talk about it, it's been publicised, it's been marketed, centre of the bottom lip, bang. Yeah. On those underslung fish, you want something in the corners.
The corners every time, every time. And again, the other emphasis, which I think people have forgotten, is we need to try and bang the drum to get back to fishing baits on the bottom.
I know we talked about this when we went
it's
fishing.
I can't tell people how much of a difference it makes. And I'll never forget my good friend Richard Stewart years and years ago. Yeah, I think his first article was called Feeding Chaos, or the Chaos Theory, or whatever thing. And basically what Rich was saying is when they get in a feeding mood, there are lots going in, sticks, weed and everything. And it's funny, I caught an incredible fish a couple of years ago, 46-pound common, probably one of the best looking fish I think I've ever caught. And
where's this from, mate? Can you say?
No, I can't say. But anyway, it when I caught this fish, marvellous, wonderful, and we're weighing it, and one of the lads said to me, look at this, Holmes, it's shitting your bait out. Oh, no, that's not your bait. And when we looked in the sling, there were plugs of silkweed. So it was obviously eating my bait in the silkweed, but there are lots going in.
Yeah.
Because they are an aquatic creature, they'll eat weed. People have forgotten that they eat weed. So if you've got bait in there, I always say to people, the most important part of a rig is your boilie, your hair, and your hook. Keep those 3 tangle-free and you're fishing. So you don't even need a lead in some instances. When I fish in weed with a PVA bag, I don't put a lead in.
Just a hook length?
Just a hook length and a collection of bait. Because the weed sets the hook. It just goes straight into a weed bed.
So you launch a solid PVA bag. What sort of hooking arrangement have you got there? What sort
just
of
a short, because it's PVA bag, I would have a swivel, a nice chameleon type braided hook link, proper braided hook link, with a boilie on a long hair.
Long hair, talk to me about what's a long hair.
Well, a long hair to me would be probably 1.5 inches, 2 inch.
Okay.
And it would be braided.
Yeah.
So you get separation, and I usually attach them on the eye of the hook.
On the eye of the hook, yeah.
So the hook sits like that.
Yeah.
And the bait comes like this. So that in its mouth you get separation.
Yeah.
And you don't need the lead to attach to pull the hook home, because the weed does that for you. Because you've created in the weed bed a collection of bait like that. And a lot of the time it's not even at the bottom, it's in the middle of the weed bed.
Yeah, of course it is.
And the fish comes along and takes it. It's a big fish tactic. I learned that at Rosemere. I caught that big one out of Rosemary, 58 and a half it was. And that was one of the hardest experiences I had because there were eyes all over me. And what I was doing was I was setting my alarm clock for 1:30 in the night and doing what I do in the middle of the night. But people were thinking I was doing what I was doing during the daytime. But I want that was just a swerve.
Doing what I do? Are you talking about this solid bag rig, or are you doing something else?
Yeah, I was preparing to catch that big one in the spring with the old salt trick. You know, and if you and if you do that trick, and it's, you know, it's been spoken about for ages and ages. If you do that trick, the hardest thing is keeping it away from other people. I always tell people this. Unfortunately, it doesn't sound very nice, but your biggest problem is not the fish; it's the other angler. We have and it's not unscruples. We're all human beings, and we all want the prize. So if you see someone doing something, it's very easy to say, "Oh, I'll let him get on with it." But sometimes, if you're keen, if you're younger, you'll latch onto it. You know, I've seen it happen so many times. I'll give you an example. I've been fishing. I don't want to name the water because I don't want to upset the fella. But I was been fishing the water lately, and one of the lads there, he's been a member for a few years, and he started to fish a part of the lake which no one else has ever fished. He was catching nothing, and I collared him and I said, you know, fair play to you, mate. I said, I know why you're doing it. I said, you're trying to get to this particular known feature. I said, and you're using a different line lay, aren't you? He said, yeah, I am, Holmes. He said, I'm going alongside this bar rather than coming from the other angle. I said, good luck to you. And he caught nothing. Everybody let him crack on. And then he had a 32 and one or two people, Then he had a 46 and then he couldn't get in it. And I was so disappointed for the lad because he's a worker and people were going in on his coattails, and one or two people caught some nice fish from there. And yet I know it was his work because I'd seen what he'd done. But there's no one's name on a swim. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can't blame people. But I know people were watching what we're doing and everything. And I kind of think to myself, But the point I'm trying to make is that when you do some of these weird and wonderful things, your biggest problem is keeping it secret. Yeah, you know, I people say, Holmes, you give all your edges away. Let me tell you, when I tell people, I've already done them.
How'd you keep them secret then? You just literally tell nobody? Do you put any decoys in there to like throw people off?
Yeah, to be fair, yeah, some of the cleverest anglers I've seen at doing swerves are the likes of Nigel Sharp and the likes of Nick Elliott and Lewis Reed and Terry Earn and that fish really busy waters like Yateley. Really clever little things that they did and stuff. And I won't go into the details on that, but because those guys knew that they were being watched, what I tend to do is I'll get people walk past me bivvy and they'll go, I see the noses will go. And I've had one or two who know me come in and say, oh, is that so-and-so, so-and-so? And I'll say, yeah, it is. I work very hard in trying to keep things to myself simply to prove to myself that they work. I've gone past the stage of just wanting to catch fish anymore, which might sound a bit eyebrow to some people, but I get a buzz out of doing new things and new tactics. I really like to think that, and that keeps it fresh for me.
Yeah,
you know, it. Last year I had an incredible year, and I can remember on a couple of occasions I went to my local syndicate lake, and if you got 4 runs in a weekend, you were doing well, and I was getting like 25 runs. And I was like, good God, this is incredible.
And is that just one? Because obviously, you're almost using it as a bit of a science experiment with regards to testing. Is that the reason for that sort of ridiculous amount of runs? Was that one set of circumstances or one lot of tests that you've done there, or what was the reason behind such an increase?
Well, I always say to people, once you unlock the key, this is why being innovative is a 2-pronged attack. 1, it leads to abject failure. And 2, it leads to incredible success. There's no in between. Because when you actually unlock it, you get first dabs at them. But here's the key. Once I'd caught all them fish, I then changed it to catch the big ones. Because if you're catching 25 fish, you're catching shoal fish. And I always say to people, as I mentioned earlier, I don't want to catch shoal fish. So I've worked very hard in doing 2 things these last 3 or 4 years. One is creating an area where most of them go. and then I fish away from it, which some people can't get their head around.
So you're intentionally bringing all the shoalfish to an area,
I'm intentionally bringing as many carp as I can to an area and then fishing away from
and
it.
then fishing away from it
Yeah. Because that's where the big ones are.
all the time.
All the time. Right, again, look at my... Right, what I'll always say to people, and I stand up in front of audiences and I say this to people, and I've been doing this for years and years and years. Not everything that comes out of my mouth is gospel, and I will accept that, and I will happily shake anybody's hands if they've got a different view or if they think I'm talking nonsense. However, what I will say to them at the end of my show is, if you think I'm talking rubbish, if you think I've been talking rubbish for years, can you answer me one question? Why do I consistently keep catching big ones? And they can't answer that, Hassan.
No,
Because
it's proof's there, mate.
it's there, bud.
Yeah.
You know, last year, as I said, 22 over 40 pound in 20 weeks. Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Where was that from, mate? Where was that from?
Well, I caught
Was it a series of different waters?
over 4 waters.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
it's funny, I was doing the math, and we were talking about earlier about how many 50s I caught on that. 11 different waters.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that gets me. When I had my own gaff, and I used to go down and fish my own lake and that, I got all this stick. Oh, it's his back garden pond. Oh, it's this, it's that, it's that. I don't hear people saying it's his back garden pond since I left there, and I've raped and pillaged all these other waters I've gone onto. All that conspiracy's gone quiet now. So what am I doing wrong now? Oh, the Rummans are the... Oh, well, no, they're not Rummans. So why... Can you tell me where... And people dissipate. I saw it... Funny, you had Jim on the other week. Jim was saying... Jim got hammered on certain waters. When he fished the... oh, crikey, what was it called? The Cemex waters. He got harassed and people firing pellets at him and all sorts of stuff because he was successful. But for all Jim's foibles and idiosyncrasies and that, one thing you could never, ever throw at Jim was, well, it's caught now. And that's what people don't like.
Does that get you down when people sort of try and discredit your captures or what?
To be fair, I've just written this book, and when I said just written this book, I've written a chapter called Every Picture Tells a Story. And funny enough, one of the pictures is, one of the last pictures in it is a picture of me with 2 copies of Carp Talk. And I'm the only man in the history of Carp Talk to be on the front cover on consecutive weeks. Never done by anybody else. And I put that up purposely. And I put that I am classed as a maverick. And I am classed as not fitting in to the niche that people want to fit me in. And that's made me get into arguments and stuff that perhaps with a bit more intelligence I shouldn't have got into. But there's always been this, I've never felt as though I've quite been accepted by the ruling classes or whatever you want to call them within the world, because I tend to give information and stuff for free. And so a lot of the time I've had people trying to disrespect me, like you say, and all the rest of it. And to be fair, anybody who tells you that trolling and people making hurtful comments about them don't get to them, they're lying, let me tell you. If people go on Instagram or go on Facebook or go on Twitter or whatever the social media is and say, I think Hassan Khan is doing a great job, you look at that and inside you go, it makes you feel better.
Yeah, totally.
Likewise, Hassan Khan's a knob. He's caught now, he's a big mouth and I can't stand him. Who does he think he is?
Completely true.
But it gets to you.
Yeah.
And then what they then do, they then try to dissect little things about you. And this is the thing that gets me. Nobody knows Mark Holmes' history. Mark Holmes' history, because of the way I was. When I became that editor of that magazine in 2004, different ball game. I remember David Hall saying to me, listen, mate, can't have these secret catches anymore. You're an editor, for God's sake.
How did that come to? This is advanced carp, isn't it?
It's advanced carp fishing.
How did that come to be? Because you weren't. That's like out the blue, randomly into journalism.
I mean, it was bizarre. I had you'll piss yourself laughing. When I was 16, I went to a National Association of Specialist Anglers conference in Guildford. Travelled all the way down from Bradford in a 3-piece suit.
No.
I'm not joking. I look like John Travolta from Saturday Night Fever. I'm not joking. I got this brown pinstripe suit on, and I went with this mate of mine from Bradford. And I was only 16, and we turned up at this National Association of Specialist Anglers. Chris Yates, Rod Hutchinson, Chris Ball, Richard McDonald. Who else were there? All the old names.
All the boys,
everybody. Anybody who were anybody. And David Hall was sat. David Hall had called it because he ran a magazine called Course Fisherman. It was 1978, and he'd called it, and they set up this. It used to be called National Association of Specialist Groups, but rather than being joined in a group because all they thought it was elitist, they called it National Association of Specialist Anglers, so you could join as an individual. And all they set this up. Anyway, when I went about my own life and stuff, I retired when our third child was born. I retired. I sold my business when I was 40. Should never have done it, but I sold my business at 40. And cut a long story short, lived in this big gaff. And anyway, I sold that, and I was going to... Do you remember Hugh Fernley Whittingstall?
Yeah.
Used to do River Cottage. River Cottage, yeah. Well, I watched River Cottage, and I was like, right, we'll do this self-sufficiency thing. So we bought this place, and the idea was I was going to be like you, Fernley Whittingstall. But the problem and stupid mistake I'd made is I'd spent all my life trying to avoid manual labour. Well, if you want to do manual labour...
It's graft, yeah.
You become a farmer. So I'd been doing this and thinking, this isn't for me. And I never forget, I was in 2004, sat in the kitchen with a wife, and I'd been to the petrol station, and there was a magazine, and it was like one of these fold things that folded in half, and it was Midland Angler. And I lived in Rugby at the time, so I looked at this thing, Midland Angler, and it's shite. And then I saw this advert at the bottom of one of the pages. Editorial assistant, advanced carp fishing. Must be conversant with carp fishing, must have good command of the English language, all that old bollocks. Yeah, please apply. And the date was something like 30th of April. And it was like mid-June, so I'm like, oh. So I saw this, I thought, oh, bollocks, I'll send this CV off. And I'll never forget, it said, send CV to David Hall at David Hall, blah, blah, blah. So I just sent my CV off. I sent my CV off like at 11 o'clock in the morning. About 12:30, Mrs. shouts out, I was outside. What? Someone's on the phone for you. Oh, I don't know. We'll find out with David Hall. On the phone, yeah. All right. Hello, it's David Hall here. Did you ever meet Ollie?
I met him only once, yeah.
It's David Hall here. Yeah. I've got your CV, yeah. Is this some kind of joke? Honestly,
yeah.
Is this some kind of joke? I says, no, why? Your last wage. I said, yeah, I earned a lot of money, didn't I? Fucking deal too, right? He says, but all this fishing. He says, would you like to come for lunch? When? Tomorrow? Whereabouts? He said, well, come to the offices. Oh, right, fine, fair enough, yeah. Phone down. Said to me, I've got a job here. Oh, really? Yeah. So, following day, goes for lunch. Yeah. I've come to see David Hall. Oh, right, fine, yeah. David, what's your name? Mark Holmes. I say, yeah, time to wait there. Right, fine, yeah. Bloke comes down, all off he goes to pub. David's talking, yeah, what have you done here, and what have you done there, and what have you done this, and what have you done here, and yeah, what have you caught, and blah, 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 and blah. Oh, right, fine. Have you had any articles published? Yeah, I did this, and blah, blah, blah. All right. Yeah. Right then, David, about this job. Oh, he says, there's no job. I said, what? He says, there's no job. I said, well, hang on a minute, mate. I said, I don't know you. You don't know me. What am I doing here? He said, well, we're having lunch. I said, yeah, Dave. Yeah, thanks. But what do you mean there's no job? He said, oh, there's no job. He said, we'll give that to a bit of a kid. That bit of a kid, by the way, was Richard Stewart. But that's by the by. He said, we've given that job to a bit of a kid. I said, well, what am I doing here then? He said, his CV was so interesting.
You just wanted to meet
I just wanted to meet you. I was like, oh, right, fine, fair enough. So I didn't think about it. So it goes on, wife, when do you start? I said, oh, no job. Hey? No job. Anyway, following Wednesday, I had like a gate, and there were like you pressed a buzzer and an intercom came on, and there was a TV. So I could see who was at the gate.
Yeah.
We had quite a long drive and stuff. And buzzer presses. And I looked, David Hall there. And I'm like, hello? David Hall here? Yeah, what do you want? Can I come and see you? Yeah, of course you can. Looking back, I know why he'd come. He'd come to see if what I'd said was true.
Yeah, cool.
You know, that I had this estate and this lake. So anyway, it comes in. Can we go to the pub? I said, David. So that been daft, mate. I said, we went for dinner. There's no job. Yeah, I've had an idea. Right, okay. So he goes to this pub and we sat down. He says, would you like to come as an editorial assistant? He said, but we can't afford to pay you. I said, oh, right. So what do you mean you can't afford to pay me? He said, well, it's only 16 grand. This was 2004. I said, I'll come. Really? Yeah. He said, well, we'll teach you how to take a photograph and we'll teach you, your English and that, because your English is shocking. And I thought my English was really good.
Yeah.
I said, no. He says, when we got your email, riddled with mistakes, your CV riddled with errors. And I'm like, oh. So he said, but what we'll do, he said, we'll send you on a course and blah, blah. But I need you to meet the editor of Total Carp first. So who's that? Yeah, Mark Colson.
Yeah.
So anyway, he brought Mark Colson. Anyway, cut long story short, I started, and within 8 weeks, I was editor. I'd gone from assistant editor to editor within.
What made you want to do that? Because it's obviously not money, is it?
Well, to be fair, I know it sounds daft. I don't care who you are. We all, as we get older, want some kind of legacy. And when I say to people, when you look at a wedding photograph, a group photograph, whose is the first face you look for? It's not the bride. It's not the bridegroom. It's your own. That is within all of us. And I'd written my first article. I was 18-year-old. I'd written in Course Angler and I'd written in Carp World. So I'd seen myself published, and I got a buzz out of seeing myself. Oh, there's my article. There's me with the fish. And so I wanted to create, and people will be throwing up at home when I say this, but I would, when I eventually finished writing my book, it's all about legacy. As you get older, you realise your own immortality. And, if I snuffed it tomorrow, my kids would be able to read stuff that I've written, see clips that I've done. And it's about creating something that's everlasting rather than just taking. Now, don't get me, that's not within all of us, because we haven't all got that power. But if you've got a creative bent, the written word and the photographic word and now the media aspect allows you an audience and a stand to do that. In the past, you would have had to been an actor or a poet or a playwright or anything like that. Suddenly, for me, who was artistically inclined that way, who liked to write, who liked to read, suddenly to incorporate that into the hobby that you loved, you get a big buzz out of it.
Yeah.
And it was something that always I wanted to do. The fact that I could also bring along other people. One of the best things I liked was always bringing on unknown writers. I gave people like Dave Moore his first set of articles. Ed Bettridge, I gave Ed his first set of articles, but don't hold that against me. But but whatever. I'm joking, Ed, by the way. But the reality is that I looked for yes, they were the old guard, or not the old guard. They were the established people. But I think good editorship and good media people are always looking to create people as well as use the old established one. That was always my complaint with some people at DHP. Well, I'll name him. With Colson. Colson had a formula of certain anglers, and he would just dip in them. He didn't go outside. I didn't think that he would try to promote outsiders so much. He just worked on one particular formula. And that's why I think that editors have a shelf life, because you can't keep doing the same thing and expecting people to constantly go, oh, this is marvellous, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
And like we spoke about, everything has a shelf life. Yeah. And when I did that job, I loved it for 18 months. The last 18 months, I hated it. And it nearly broke me, did the job. Oh, it was awful.
In what way?
Well, I remember Colson saying to me, he said, you're a journalist first and a carp angler second. I said, no way. I'm a carp angler first and a journalist. He said, no, you're not. You're a journalist first and a carp angler second. And I had massive problems with Mark. And, this isn't a slag fest, but, one of the reasons why Mark Holmes is sat here now, 20 years later, and Mark Colson isn't in the industry anymore, is because of that. Because I am a carp angler first and foremost, not a jobbing journalist. And those guys who are in the media now that are hardcore life carp anglers, as I call them, I know that they'll still be doing this in their 50s and 60s and 70s. You can't say that about a lot of them. I know there's certain people in this industry, I'm not going to mention it, who, if it weren't for the fact that they earned a living out of it, they wouldn't carp fish anymore. You know, I unfortunately am addicted to this game, and I will do this for as long as I possibly can. But to go back to why it was a nightmare was I would find out that invariably I'd be sat behind people, household names, thinking, he's shit. I'd sit behind him with a camera. I'll never forget once. I won't name the angler. I rang him up and I said, right, I've been asked by a bait company to do a feature with it. Oh, yes, please, Holmes. Yeah. I said, do you know where you want to go? No. Right. Do you want to write it or do you want me to write it? Oh, can you write it for me? Right. You want me to take the pictures? Yeah. Do you know what it's about, the subject? No. Right. Right, so you don't know the venue. You want me to write it. You want me to take photographs and you don't know what you want to talk about? No. Right.
Was it that bad?
Oh, mate, let me tell you. There are, you see, one of the detractions of the magazine world, in my opinion, and I mean my opinion, is ghostwriting.
Yeah.
Mark Holmes was particularly keen in ghostwriting. He had a point. He said that, look, if you write it, you can dictate the flow, the content to fit in with the rest of your magazine. That's fine if you're looking at the magazine as a whole, but I always believed that the only true essence of Hassan Khan is Hassan Khan's own word, own style, own method of doing things. If I become Hassan Khan, it looks acceptable in Article 1, 2 and 3. Then Article 4, 5 and 6, it's the same stuff, different day. There's no Hassan Khan running through it. And you'll know this, having been in the magazine game yourself, there's an awful lot of named anglers who don't write their own articles. They do like live features. Well, I prefer to sit down in my office and go, boom, and send it. And even to this day now, the editors will tell you there's only two left, and there's only Joe Wright and Matt Townsend, but they'll tell you, Holmesy writes his own stuff. And I write my own stuff, and then if they've to come out and film me, it's based upon the article that I've written.
Yeah.
And I always think that I always wanted to promote that, because then you got a different feel to your magazine. The only problem with it is that it got homogenized, where it became not about the angler, it became more about the internal workings of the magazine. And I'll tell you a little story which will really make you laugh. I think I might have told everybody before this. I did when you do a magazine, you have the last thing that you do is you cover, and you have a colour copy. And I'm in the office one day and I get a phone call from Orly. You didn't get many phone calls from Orly, and it was like, Holmes, it you? Can you come to my office, please? I thought, here we go. And I walked over to his office. David had a big office. And I'll never forget, I walked through the door. And as I walked through the door, he threw, like a frisbee, this big piece of card at me, which had my cover on, threw it across the room. So I caught it and I picked it up. And it was the cover of this month's Advanced Carp Fishing. And he said, pardon the language, ladies and gentlemen. He went, what the fuck is that? And I said, it's this month's Advanced Carp Fishing cover. Orly, like fuck it is. So what do you mean? He said, right, sit down. Let me explain something to you. He said, who's that? And it was Dave Moore.
Right.
I said, it's Dave Moore. Dave Moore? Who's Dave Moore? I said, well, he's quite a well-known Yorkshire carp angler, caught a lot of fish. Well, how old is he? I said, well, 52, 53. Right. Richie McDonald. Yeah. He said, he must be 70 now. Well, I said, I don't think Richie's that old. He said, and who's this? Jock Downs. Who's Jock Downs? I said, he's the bloke that's put all these stocking into Dinton pastures at this one. He said, I've had a Jockey Wilson, not Jock Downs. He said, how old's Jock Downs? I said, it's about 63, 64. He said, right. He said, so we've got 53-year-old, 70-year-old, and a 63-year-old on magazine. Yeah. He said, Holmes, he said, you're the only person I know whose combined age of front cover anglers are more than the pages you've got in the magazine. I said, all right. He said, Holmes, he said, you don't get this. He said, when I get people looking at my magazines, he said, and it is my magazine. He So when I get people looking at my magazine, he said, I want them to think I'm enthused, I look good, I feel great, I want to go fishing. So when I look at this cover, all I see is I'm old, I'm fucked, and I want to go back to bed. So he says, so that we're not having this cover. So typical Holmes, I said, glasses were off. And I always do this when I'm mad.
Glasses off, you went back at him, did you?
Oh yeah, because I didn't need the brass, you see. So I said, right, David, I said, let's see how it works. I said, this isn't total carp. I said, this is advanced carp. I said, can you tell me, what do you know about carp fishing? Now, piss off, he said. I know what your game is. Stop it. You know I know not about carp fishing. I said, exactly. I said, this isn't total carp, where you've got beginners and intermediates and then, experts. I said, this is advanced carp fishing. So basically, it's top of the tree. I said, you don't know anything about it. I said, you change that cover and we're done. What? I said, we're done. I said, and when I say we're done, I won't work a notice. I'll go now. Anyway, we had, and if I can I'll try and get the magazine cover for you to look at. There's a picture of Dave Moore on the front and two sub-pictures underneath of Jock Downs and Richie McDonald. And I knew my days were numbered then. And strangely enough, the following 2 months, I had Joe Morgan on the front, who were about 12-year-old, and I'd got Damien Clark on the front after that. Oh, I forget how old Damien was, about 35 or something, but the parting of the ways were coming soon.
Yeah.
You know as well as I do that editors have to have editorial freedom. If they don't have editorial freedom, then you're not an editor. You're an editor in name only. And what David wanted to do, because I didn't fit the role that Mark Coulson wanted, and to be fair to Mark, David had been devil's advocate. Mark had caught nothing. I don't think he ever caught. I think he'd had a couple of 20s or maybe an odd 30. Suddenly this guy comes in and all he's giving it, he's had this, he's had that, he's had this, he's had that. And I go and catch these big fish while I'm doing the job. Well, you don't need to be Einstein to work out that I wouldn't have been on Mark Coulson's Christmas list. And I wouldn't count out to him either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was tough towards the end because I loved the job and I loved the people in it, but I'd done my time and I reached a very important point. And I say this to everybody in this industry, and I don't say this frivolously. There comes a point when you have to decide: am I in front of the camera or am I behind the camera? And I'll tell you something straight: you can't do both. Because if you do both, you'll fall between two stools. Because that's the problem with a lot of people who work in this industry. The likes, I'm in the fishing trade, it's my hobby. Oh, I'm meeting all these people that I've seen in magazines. Oh, look at all these fishing tackle. Oh, look at all these great waters. Oh, great, marvellous, wonderful. Yeah. Oh, I want to go fishing. Sorry, mate, you got to work. Eh? And so they see the people that they're mixing with, the like of Mark Holmes, the like of Jim Shelley, the likes of whomever who've got time when we're just fishing all the time. They're not fishing all the time. No. They're seeing lots of photos of fish and they're in lots of report. So if you're not careful, it can make you disenchanted because you think to yourself, well, I could do that. And invariably half of them could, but they haven't got the time. If you work in this trade, your fishing's not knackered. You haven't got any time to go fishing.
No.
I mean, don't get me wrong, you'll have certain people who try and breach it, and I see people going, they have the laptop on the bank and stuff like that. Don't work, mate. There are very, very few can bridge the gap between being in front of the camera and being behind it, unless they're outstanding or do something outstanding or catch outstanding fish. And it's tough, mate.
Yeah.
And that's why I made the decision to come away from there, because I didn't want to, because I've always been in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what I was. And I never forget, one of the best compliments I ever had, he's dead now, bless him, was Jan Porter. Jan was the first guy I ever did an article with when Mark let me go on my own. And I'll never forget, we went to Makins and we were sat there and Jan was doing all these weird and wonderful things. And he was a very astute fella, very kind man, but was also very astute. And we were talking about things. And he said to me clearly, he said, just look, Holmes, he said, it's patently obvious to anybody who's spent time with you that you're a carp angler. He said, the people that I deal with at DHP, up until you, weren't carp anglers. And I was like, oh, right. Because he'd had people, like Martin Ford and they were like Mark Coulson And I know it sounds daft, and this isn't to have a pop at those people, but when I start talking about cooking Chinese food, and Ken Wong or whatever his name comes on and goes, "Excuse me, Mark Holmes, who are you? What have you ever made? What books have you ever written?" And I go, "Yeah, but I'm an enthusiast." Hey, so why are you telling people what they should be doing? That's the same with carp fishing. It shouldn't be, because people can have really good ideas, really innovative tackle, really innovative bait, and not have the time to be out there. But at every course, you get some arse at the back of the room. "What's he ever caught? What's your personal best? What?" And you're flawed.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be, because it's, an album full of big fish is no measurement of intelligence. Let me tell you.
No.
But in a results-orientated business, very much like TV punditry, when they get these last night I watched the England game, yesterday rather, and you'd got Ian Wright on there, you'd got Frank Lampard, you got Rio Ferdinand, and you got Alan Shearer and Gary Lineker. Every one of them ex-top internationals. They know the game.
Yeah.
You can't argue with that fact. But suddenly, if you had a presenter on there giving it big spuds with the tactics, someone would write and say, "Hang on a minute, that Mark Chapman's never kicked a ball in his life. What does he know about the game?" Well, from the tennis, exactly the same. I do pride myself and take a little bit of self-satisfaction, if I can these days, is that I'm still out there doing it.
Yeah, you're doing it.
That's the difference. Don't get me wrong. Health issues, age. Bless him, Tim Paisley's going to Birch this week on the open day, and he's 85.
Yeah,
My God, it's phenomenal.
It's brilliant.
Absolutely phenomenal. They can still be out there going fishing. And you get some knobs saying, "Oh, well, he hasn't been for a year and a half." Well, we've had bloody COVID, for Christ's sake, and he's 85. And it's exactly the same with me. When I said to you about I get annoyed at people pulling me to bits, they've no idea what I've caught in the north. You get up to Yorkshire and ask people about what Mark Holmes has caught, and you might get a bit of a different answer than what you think. I did extremely well, but I kept it under wraps.
But also, it's the whole prospect of the whole principle of you having to prove it. You don't have to prove anything.
No, you
anyone.
don't. You don't. But sometimes, if you get, you mentioned earlier about social media. Let me tell you, Hassan, if social media would have been around when I was 20, someone would have shot me at 25. Make no mistake. Oh, mate.
Some good quotes to take out of this.
Somebody would have shot me at 25. Mark Holmes has been found dead in his car. Single bullet wound to the back of the head. Police are looking for 100 people as suspects.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly, because that, if you're opinionated, and I don't, the one thing is I get when people say, "Yeah, it's opinionated," something. Yes, I am opinionated, but I like to think that I'm balanced, so I will accept another point of view, even if it's alien to me, and respect that person. And secondly, as I said earlier, the opinions are backed up with catches. When I put these bait tips and these bait applications and these edges together, one thing I always say at the beginning of every show or every broadcast or every media outlet that I do, these results, these applications are based on results, not hearsay. And if you think, "Well, I don't think you can keep doing this," why is it every single year, bang, bang, bang? It's just incredible.
You're still doing it?
Yeah. The first year I was at Shimano, I caught 6 UK 50s in 1 year.
Yeah, it's madness.
And 9 40s the first year. The second year I was at Shimano, we had the COVID, and in 20 weeks I caught 22 fish over 40 pounds. And so far this year I've had 150, 48, 46, 45, 41 and a 40.
We're definitely going to look through. I mean, my plan, you've just ripped it to pieces here. I like this. We're dotting around, but it's good.
Yeah.
It's good. We're definitely going to talk about in depth some of the captures.
Mm-hmm.
What I wanted to go back on, because before I took you down the wormhole of advanced carp and editorial stuff, we were looking at bait edges. We left on dead baits, salt.
Yeah.
Pre-spawning carp, salt. Talk to me about salt curing edges, salt as a whole.
If you remember, there are certain things that I say and that I do which have become established now as rank and file statements. And I smile because until I stood up at Carping On in 2011, no one had heard of the phrase pre-spawning and post-spawning carp. That was Mark Holmes who stood up and said, here's pre-spawning carp, here's post-spawning carp, two different animals. Now people talk about that
I owe you a few quid. I've
all
used that
the
quite a lot.
time about pre and post spawning, but it was me that first did it. And basically, it's understanding what their requirements are. And I always say to people that before the spawn, any idiot can catch them, and I believe that. It's if you think about it realistically, if we had an old close season, what would get caught? It'd be very few caught. Now, April and May, I've had this, I've had that, I've had this, I've had that. If you can get onto waters before they spawn and get the right conditions, you will annihilate them.
Clubbing season,
It is clubbing season, because what they are looking for is they are looking for a genetic buzz. And that's the difference. They are looking for certain things that they need in order to get ready for spawning. And one of them, as I keep saying, is saline. They are there's loads of stuff written about this. In actual fact, been doing this for over 20 years, and some dick reckoned on I'd copied him because he'd come up with cured hookbaits. Cured hookbaits is only part of the scenario of salt. The real importance of salt, and people misunderstood it, is not to think that it's an additive for bait and carp will eat salt because they like to eat salt. No. This salt approach before the spawn is based upon what their natural requirement is and their intake of salt. So this 6-week process that I put together is based upon them getting their saline levels. So when I spoke about that rosemary 58 pounder that I caught a few years back, that was a classic example. That particular fish, when you use salt and they come out of their semi-permanent hibernation state, it attracts them because they're looking to increase their saline levels. So they're not looking to eat this, they're looking to ingest this. So they will sit near the rock salt. They will rub against the rock salt. You will find that I had some enormous arguments with some people when I first said this, because people said, oh, you're polluting waters, you're doing this, you're doing that. We're not talking about putting copious amounts in. But what I've found is that it is a great way of singling out large females. And I'll tell you for why. If you have a small male that needs 50% of its body to be saturated with saline, and you need a female with 50% of her body to be saturated with saline, and she's 50 pounds, you don't need to be Einstein to work out who's going to have the more saline intake. It's the big one. So what you find, when you put rocks in to a lake, you will get a collection of most of the fish in the lake coming to it. As their saline levels come up, they will then move about. The big females will keep coming back because their saline levels take longer. But where the trick is to get the balance right between introducing your bait that you intend to catch them on and this saline. If you just keep putting saline in, once their saline levels
They're off.
are reached, they're off.
It's
no good. So what you need to do is, I always work it this way. I say, imagine it as a 6-week process. In week 6, let's say we do, on Saturday, we put in a lump of rock salt. I would put in the same size of rock salt on the Wednesday. And then we're going to the second week. I do exactly the same. I'd put a lump of rock salt in on the Saturday, and I'd put another lump of rock salt in on the Wednesday. Then we get to the third week. What I'd do with the third week, I'd put 3/4 the amount of salt in, and 1/4 your bait. Not cured bait, just the bait you're going to fish with. So 1/4 amount boilies.
on the same spot.
On the same spot. And then you do the same on the Wednesday. And then on the 4th week, you put on the Saturday, half salt, half bait. On the Wednesday, half salt, half bait. And then on the 5th week, 1/4 salt, 3/4 bait Saturday, 1/4 salt, 3/4 bait Wednesday. And then on the 6th week, 1 cured hookbait on that spot. And that's cured hookbait has got salt on it, and it's got that bait. Now, why is the reason for that? Because when they first need a lot of salt, they'll come to the spot. As they come back to it, if there's no bait there, they'll fuck off. If there's bait there, they'll stop with the bait and they'll start feeding.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing is you're weaning them onto it.
Yeah.
You're weaning them onto coming to that spot to get the saline intake, but also to get your bait. And every time I do this, it's to catch the biggest fish in the lake. And if you look over the last few years, the lads who are fishing will tell you he does it every year. Bang. There you go. There's that big one.
Is that because the big uns stay on that spot for longer?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is what I mean about local knowledge. I had a friend in Cambridge who was telling me, Holmes, it's sat there. It's sat, I can see it.
Yeah.
It's sat on top of that rock. And I told him straight, I said, mate, if you want to fish, no, I won't fish for it. And I went down, and the biggest problem was it was sat there, and I was waiting for it to move out in order to put a bait there. It just sat there, and it sat there for like 3-4 hours, and I was like, shit. And eventually it moved out, and I was in light flint. I cast a cure duck bait out. It stayed there for 3 hours. After 3 hours, off it went 58.3. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Have you sent me a photo of that one or not?
Yeah, I think I might have done. No, I haven't sent you a photo.
Good. Don't get it off your phone now, Holmesy. I'll see that later.
Yeah.
Send me that.
That's massive, mate.
58
58.3. In actual fact, I can remember when I netted it, I went to pick it out of the. I went to lift the net up. I couldn't lift the net up, and there was a lad called Steve Carter, bless him, a lovely fella. Steve, he's a joiner, and he was from Lowestoft, and it was so funny. We had such a laugh together. When I first went down there, he said to me, he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Oh, I'm from Yorkshire." "Oh, bad news." I said, "Why?" I said, "They don't like northerners, these fish." And so we had this banter about they don't like northerners and this fish. And I never forget, I'd been down and I caught it. I was very lucky. I caught quite a rare 50-pounder in November that hadn't been out for ages. And then I caught this fish in the April, this 58. And everybody wants to catch it, of course.
Yeah.
And I caught it and I was like, oh. And he's fishing the other side of the lake. So I walked round and he comes out of his bivvy and, "How you doing, Holmesy?" I said, "I've got it." "What?" I said, "I've got it." He went, "You joking?" I said, "No, mate." I said, "I've got it." Fuck. Came round, took the pictures, and he said something very kind to me. He said, "You know, Holmes," he said, "I'm going to have to be more like you." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You don't give a shit about blanking, do you?" I said, "You don't." He said, "I've watched you here." Because most of the time when I was down there, we're down there. He said, "You just keep." I said, "Steve, all it is have a plan." I said, "And when I've got a plan, the peripheral stuff doesn't bother to me."
No.
I said, "And now you see what the plan was." So you just wanted to catch stuff in it. I said, "Yeah, I do, mate, yeah." And it was so funny. It was just an enormous fish. I think it's done 61 now.
That's just ridiculous.
It's just an enormous. And I've still kept the ticket. I keep saying I'll go back and catch it at 60. And then I think to myself, come on, Holmes, you just, it's just about weights and stuff. But it is a fantastic fish. And again, from people that don't know, it's a tough water now. It used to be quite easy. When people first stock carp into a lake, for the first 12 months, they're very easy to catch because they don't understand the food cycle. The food cycle, for carp to understand the ecosystem of a lake, they need to be in it for 12 months because they need to know where the food is in spring, summer, autumn and winter.
Yeah.
And if you put them in spring, then they've no idea what's going to happen. So they get caught quickly. But you get them in there, and after about 18 months, they'll get the measure of the place. And on small waters, they get harder and harder to catch. Yeah. Let me tell you. People talk to me about, fishing big inland seas and stuff. You find the fish on these big waters, and it's a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, on smaller waters, no, you need to be really careful exactly how you do it. But it's all about, like this Steve said, a plan, and that's how my mind works. If I have an objective, I'll just go to it. I mean, one of the most, not disappointing, that's too strong word. One of the I fished for the Caravan Park Linear, which I told you. Yeah. And I caught it on a Tuesday afternoon and a Friday morning. And when I caught it on the Friday morning, I was gutted. The lads have been on there for years and years and years trying to catch that fish. And I caught it on the Tuesday afternoon. Hey! All that. Yeah. Just as I'm packing up Friday, rod rolls off, same fish again. Just slipped it back. 52.5. Probably one of the best looking linears in country. And one of the anglers, bless him, I won't name him, came round, put his hand on my shoulder and said, it's time for you to go home.
Yeah.
And I had to go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It broke me heart going, to be fair, because, but there's some, there were people on there that, but going back to the point, once I'd unlocked how to catch it, job done. Because one thing which I always say to people, don't believe this, it's been caught Monday, I'm not going to bother going this week.
Oh, no, yeah.
Let me tell you.
They come out
They come out quite a bit. They come out more than you realise. Sometimes half the battle. The biggest problem with a lot of waters now is people know every single fish that's come out. Yeah. So there's no blissful ignorance. I'll never forget Rob Hughes, bless him, rang me years ago and said, Holmes, he says, I'm doing a feature for Carpology. Would you like to come out on it? I said, what's that then? He said, well, we get a named angler, he says, and we go out, he says, and you get a marker float, he says, and you lead around. He says, then tell me what you think. He said, then I get my wetsuit on, get in, verify it. He said, then you cast your lines out. He said, tell me what you think it's like. Then I go have a look, and in the morning, I said, whoa. I says, Rob, I don't need you to tell me how shite my analogy is. And I certainly don't need you to tell me how shite my rigs are. I said, when I'm sat behind them 3 rods, I'm blissfully ignorant.
Yeah.
And long may it continue. I said, but now we live in this world of, I need the information. So you've got bait boats that aren't just simply taking baits long distances into awkward places now, but they've got sonar, they've got underwater cameras. I'll never forget that German guy, I can't remember his full name, Christian Finkeldilk or whatever his name is, that bald-headed guy that used to be with Solar. And he caught that big common that they had in Germany. I think they called it Clarissa.
Yeah.
Or Mary, or I can't remember. But it was about £89. And I found out that what Chris used to do is he'd snorkel and take his baits underwater.
Take his rigs down,
and take his rigs down. I just can't get my swede around that.
No?
I find that's a step too far for me.
Okay.
It's the same with boats. People think I'm anti-bait boat. I'm not anti-bait boat. I don't like rules. I believe that there's only 2 rules in any fishery. When I've owned fisheries, I've only had 2 rules. 1, respect the fish, and 2, respect the other angler. Those are the only rules. The only problem is that there's too much ambiguity about the second one, respect the other angler. And the thing is about bait boats is that it allows inexperienced anglers to fish further than they would. Mm. And that's why I don't like them. But it's also, I'll be honest with you, this trait now of jumping in a rowing boat as well. Lots of waters that I've got tickets for allow you to go in a boat and take your baits out. Not take your baits out, but take your bait out now. Or if you hook a fish, jump in a boat and land it. Christ, if I think back to some of the chunks I've lost when I was younger in Yorkshire, I'll tell you something now, you're pissing laughing at this. Me and my mate was fishing a place called Raskelf Lake in Alperby in York in the early 80s. And I don't know what it was, but I was always in the water. Shirt off, trousers off when I were in. And every time I was snagged up, I'm going in for it. There used to be, Carp Strikes Back, by the way, when they there used to be, in the Carp Strikes Back, there was a picture of a lad called Paul Gummer, and he was on a gravel pit in Lincolnshire, and he got the rod, and the sequence of the photographs was him swimming out with the rod in the air, with his fish attached. Well, that's what it was like. You'd play a fish, and if it's snagged up, I'm going in. And when I think of the amount of times I go in and I'm out there, but I'll never forget, I'm on this little lake at Raskelf in Alperby, New York. Hooks his fish, it snagged me, I'm going in. And I goes in, strips down to underpants, and there were these 2 old boys on boxes fishing on the railway side. And you know how noise travels across the lake? He's fishing, and I heard him say, Joe, what? He said, have you seen this lad? And he turned around and he went, what? He says, not only are the content we're filling it in, he's fucking swimming with them now.
Did you get the fish though? You got the fish? No.
And that's another thing. The amount of times I went in the drink and the fish weren't there. Because what we used to do, again, it's lack of knowledge, which we have now. How many times do you play a fish now, get a shimweed or get a snag, and you get the old double bump, which is bump, and it's off. So it's come out of the fish and it's gone straight in a snag. But in them days, we didn't have the right response on the rods.
Yeah.
I never forget, my mate was one of the first guys to buy a carbon fibre rod from the Bradford fraternity. And he took this fishing with me. And I'm still on the glass fibre. So I'm giving it the old Poloni. Yes, it's a lot of money for a rod to put on rest. You don't need it. And I never forget, he went to relieve himself or get a sandwich or something, and he gets a check on his rod, and I picked this rod up. Hassan, it was like playing it with your arm.
Yeah.
Compared to the glass rods that I'd used,
Yeah, like spaghetti.
suddenly I'd picked up a carbon fibre rod, and it was like, wow. So, going back to what I was saying, the advent of tackle that we now have, it's incredible, mate.
Yeah.
I used to fish on that Queen Mary's Pond where I held a late record. There was a cast to a weed bed. I'm not joking, which was about 68 to 70 yards. I was like Jeff Capes running up with shot put to try and get this far.
Yeah.
I had 6 pound line and leaders. Nearly dislocated my shoulder just to get 70 yards. Now I could literally do an underhand flick.
Yeah, easy.
So when people talk about, oh, this isn't right, that's right, let me tell you, there's a couple of points that I want to say unequivocally. A, the quality of fishing tackle now is incredible. And secondly, the stock available to fish for is incredible. So when boring old farts like me lament about the good old days, they weren't that good, son. You know. So to go back to something, that's it in a nutshell. It's there to catch the biggest fish in the lake, not the most, the biggest fish in the lake. And usually I do that. And I will observe. From week 1 to week 5, you're not fishing. No. Remember that? Week 1 to week 5, you're not fishing, but you're observing them. And what I always say to people, I've said it from day one, get a piece of rock salt, put it in an aquarium. Get a piece of rock salt, put it in your mate's garden pond. When you're at the lake doing this, fish a corner, fish shallow, so you can see with your own eyes what it does and how it attracts fish. And then you'll go, right, I need to get into this. There are so many methods where people fall down because they don't follow it to its nth degree.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit like, I don't know, a bit like drinking percolated coffee and just boiling a kettle and putting it in and saying, no, I don't like that stuff. You're not doing it properly.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to look at it properly, you need to convince yourself. And what I've always said to people, and they misunderstood me, is that I always say question everything a sponsored angler tells you. Everything. Because he's got a vested interest.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make you a snape if you actually say, excuse me, Mr. Sponsored Angler, can you tell me why you do it that way? Excuse me, Mr. Sponsored Angler, can you tell me what bait ingredients in it? Excuse me, Mr. Sponsored Angler, can you tell me if the ball bearings and gearings are right on that reel? Now, if he's a proper sponsored angler, he should be able to answer those questions. Mm. What makes me smile, and I'm not going to be contentious here and name names, is, right, here we are, Mr. Bait Company, and great news. We've signed Fred Bloggs, and we're going to talk to Fred Bloggs. Now then, here's Fred Bloggs at his lake. Over to you, Fred. Yes, I know naught about bait, but when whoa, back the bus up. You know naught about bait. What is the point of Fred Bloggs joining Mr. Bait Firm if he knows naught about bait? But I see it all the time. I know nothing about bait. You shouldn't be saying that. If you're a proper consultant, you should be getting his bait and saying, you know what, I think you're actually boiling that for too long. What do you mean? Well, there's no roach pecking at it and it's not breaking down quickly enough and it's not floating. Every boiler that you have after 3 or 4 days should float to the surface. If it don't float to the surface, then it's got too much saturated fat in it. Mm. But if you ask Mr. Bateman why it's got too much saturated fat in it, he'll tell you the proper idea is it has to go through the machines in the factory because he's not rolling it at home anymore. And that's the key to it. You have to understand is reality and is bespoke. And making the two meet is the key. A lot of what I talk about is bespoke. Holmes is fiddling about in his garage. Holmes is fiddling about in his kitchen. When you suddenly have to do 4 ton of bait,
it's commercial.
It's got to go through the machines. Yeah. And if there isn't the correct amount of saturated fat, it's going to break and all. So you have to understand that we live in a commercial carp world. Yeah. You have to understand that you've got to live with that, but you are still able to put your own spin on it. And literally, the information that's available now, the world's your oyster.
Yeah.
But it comes to what I said earlier to you. How hard or how easy you want to do it. If you just want to go fishing, get away from the family, have a lovely couple of nights fishing, open a couple of cans, hope that something big comes along or anything comes along, that's brilliant and you crack on. And we at Nash or we at Shimano or we at Fox or we at Avid or whoever, will support you tremendously. It doesn't have to be a bloke sat in a bivvy with a beard and a woolly jumper and a picture pinned on his bivvy wall of some numpty with a big fish. And I've only been here 48 nights. It doesn't have to be like that.
No.
No,
as you said before, it's a broad church.
It is a broad church, mate, yeah.
One thing I want to talk to you before we move off the salt subject, you said salt cured hook bait, the last part of the puzzle of that little process. Talk to me about your cured salt hook baits, because you do them bespoke.
I do them bespoke, yeah. And again, it's if you think about it realistically, because I'm talking about a hook bait principle, you don't have to go silly with it. One of the funniest things, conversations I had, and I won't name him, bless him, quite a well-known angler actually. One of the funniest conversations I had a few years ago was a well-known angler on me and said, Holmesy, I've just sorted 20 kilos of cured bait out. I went, I beg your pardon? He said, I've just cured 20 kilos of bait. I said, bud, if you live to be 200 years old, you won't have used it all. I said,
He's catching a lot of carp, that boy.
I said, it's an hook bait principle. I thought, so first and foremost, it's a hook bait principle. So I do not use cured baits as attractors of loose feed. No, I use salt as the attractor and normal bait. The cured bait is the halfway house, which has got one or the other. So what does that mean? That means you only have to do half a kilo or a kilo, and it'll last you for ages. And what you basically do, the way I do it, is I air dry baits, first of all. So I take all the moisture out of it. I then put them in the freezer. Okay. I will put them in the freezer for about a week to 2 weeks, almost to the point where they've got freezer burn. You know when you can see through the packet and they're almost white? At that point, then I buy, you can buy it on the internet, saltpetre, Petre. Right? And that's a curing salt. And it's what butchers use to rub into ham to cure it. So it's very fine. And you put it in a tray which has a depth of about twice the depth of your boilie.
Right.
So you've got a thin, shallow tray. You put your saltpetre in, let's say it's an inch. You get your frozen boilies out of the freezer after 2 weeks. So they've been air dried and they've been frozen. You then put them in almost like planting seeds. Put them in strategically and cover them up. And you leave them for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, you uncover them and you'll find that what's happened is as they have defrosted, the moisture inside the bait has drawn the salt in. So the curing goes from the outside in.
Right.
Not from the inside out. So it actually cures it all. Now, here's the important bit. You must tie the baits on.
Yeah, you said this before.
Don't puncture them with a needle or drill them, because invariably you'll split them. And the other important aspect to understand is that they will break down in about 5 or 6 hours.
Obviously, water temperature, does that affect that? Does that speed that up, or is it pretty consistent?
It's pretty consistent, because don't forget, in spring you're talking about water temperatures generally which are about 10 to 16 degrees, probably 8 to 16 degrees. Once you've got to get to 18 degrees before they start even thinking about spawning. So that's why you need that sort of temperature. That's not going to affect the breakdown of the bait.
Okay.
It's the salt and the fact that you've taken the moisture out. You can, if you want, there are halfway houses to do this, and I've shown people how to do this. If you get rock salt and you break it down into small little rocks like diamonds, not salt powder, but if you break it down into little rocks, you can make them into round PVA bags, put your normal bait on and cast it out. And then you have it sitting on just within a small. Then you get away. That's if you've not got time to do the curing. But the curing, like I said, takes probably about 6-7 weeks, and you've got enough bait to last you. And because it's salt, it never goes off.
Yes, sound.
You know.
So when you store that, if you were to store that,
you put a silagel in it.
Yeah.
A little tub.
Yeah.
You don't overfill it so they don't sweat. Little tub, a couple of packets of silagel, seal it down.
Enough.
It's enough, mate.
Yeah. Nice. One area that I did forget, liquids. Well, infamous, mate.
Yeah, to be fair, mate, again, that's something that I like to think that when I'm brown bread, someone will say Mark Holmes' work with liquids was able to transform fishing. But I think I'm kidding myself, mate. I'll never get acknowledged for for what I do really in relation to bait, because when I did it, it wasn't with a bait company's name on my head. And when you then become associated with a bait company, you then leave that bait company and very tribal. You get all sorts of nonsense going about. You know, I often say it's a little bit like this Harry Kane situation. I'm a big Tottenham fan, so I don't want Harry Kane to leave. But if I was Harry Kane, he wants to win things. He's not going to win those things at Tottenham. If he goes to play for Manchester City, I aren't going to be effing and jeffing at him, because he's done his best for Tottenham whilst he's been there. And if someone said to me, Mark, when I was young enough, Mark, here's twice the wage and more possibility of you winning something, you're going to do that. You must. I find it sad how tribal some of the bait nonsense can be.
Right.
You know, and usually it's not the main men of the bait company. It's usually the people underneath that are part of team, whatever it's called or whatever. And I do smile and think it's, pardon my language, a bit of a dick measuring competition. You know, there's a lot of good bait companies out there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them that are looking to try and come up with good things. But like everybody, they plagiarise stuff. But I remember I did a feature with Danny Fairbrass years and years ago, about 15 years ago, and we had I came down to Elstow Woolm where he had the ticket, and we were talking, and Danny was telling me about his early days, and he said, what people don't understand, Mark, is it's called a developments, and the clue there is developments. I think I might have dropped that now, but that's the reality. Nobody's a patent on good ideas. So Mark Holmes might come with, I think I should do this and this, then someone will look at it and go, all right, fine. Where I think I've made a lot of advancements are in the use of liquid and also in the use of certain ingredients, like insects. People were never messing about with insects until I started using them, and they thought that there were a certain way of doing it, and I showed them different ways. So I like to think that the liquid is just an extension of that. Right. What I always realise, and I tell people this, is that if you imagine bait in a three-part matrix, boilie, not very attractive, paste, quite attractive, liquid, very attractive. So what we're trying to do is put liquid on a hook. At the moment, I can't do that. And when people talk about boilies not being very attractive, that's because a lot of people have forgotten the concept behind boilies. The concept behind boilies, if you go back to right at the beginning of this diatribe, I spoke about open fisheries and mixed fisheries,
yeah,
and all different species. Boilies were made to stop the roach and the tench and the bream feeding on them. We came up with a bait that almost exclusively was only eaten by the carp. Now then, as I've watched over the years, the advancement of carp-only fisheries, that goes out of the window.
Yeah, of course.
Because there's not
Nothing
the nuisance.
else in there.
That's it, there's not the nuisance species in there. So the ability to use paste, the ability to use liquids, and the only reason why I think liquids are so important is because it makes the attraction so much easier. The solubility aspect of attraction is massive. And where I worked very hard is trying to find how people could apply that to their own fishing. And that's how I came up with this idea of using syrups. And syrups came back from a long, long time ago. I think I've told you this before. I first came across syrup in about 1981. And I fished a lake where I was catching them on bread crust. And what you do is you get the bread crust, you cut it into like a matchbox size, you get your hook, you put so the shank was half in the white bit and half in the crust bit with a little point sticking out. You dunk it in the edge with water so that it had a bit of weight for casting, and you'd flick it out. And invariably what would happen is a smaller fish would come and peck in it, and if you didn't get a take very quickly, they'd break it away from the hook. So I thought to myself that I need something that can possibly try and keep it together. So I thought, I know, golden syrup. If I dunk it in golden syrup, but just lightly, it'll still float on the top. But the golden syrup, because it's coagulated, will keep the actual mass of bread together. Oh, that's brilliant idea. And I cast this out, and I watched these fish from close range. And all of a sudden, in about 10 minutes, these fish had gone from the top. They disappeared. And what I realised they were doing was, as the syrup globules were dropping down, they were falling down to the bottom of the lake. And because that wasn't dissipating in the water column, it was going right down to the bottom of the lake. That's what they did. So now I hear people saying it all the time. I see them doing the old glass trick. That again is me.
Yeah, the old glass.
Yeah,
trick.
that again was me. Howard did that on Northern Angling Show when I used to call it liquid gold, which turned out to be hydro wheat, which is massively sold now. And all companies, they sell it to all companies. But syrups are massive. And the one thing I like about syrups, particularly golden syrup, is that if you put it down on your lake spot as the attraction, you've no problem with birds.
No.
I first started using that to get around the bird problem.
Really?
Because people, one of the lakes I was fishing, you'd put a bed of bait down and the birds would be down
straight
for it.
on you, yeah.
You put a bed of syrup down, they dive down once there's not there for them. Yeah. So they'd go away. And what I found is that you can put, the reason why I like golden syrup so much is you can put other items within there. So you can put gammarus in there. You can put lysine powder in there. You can put tubifex worms in there. You know, you go to an aquarium shop, buy them little squares of tubifex worms, cut them into quarters and put that in your golden syrup. And you'll find that when you put it out in the pond or you put it in a tank so you see what happens, it'll leak. Then all of a sudden, just periodically, they'll rise up with the tubifex worms. And it just leaks from the bottom to the top rather than the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
Because I saw so many lads, they will catch them on zigs from the top and it goes about 6 inches and then it's dissipated. I wanted something that got them down to the bottom. And but one thing you've got to understand with these sort of systems is that it puts a lot of emphasis on your hook bait. Well, if you have a lot of emphasis on your hook bait, you don't need to be Einstein to work out that after you've caught a few fish, then surely they're going to wise up to that. Yeah, you bang on, mate, absolutely bang on. So what you do is you need to throw them an odd freebie or two. So when you put your specialised bait out there, put 4 or 5 specialised baits as well, so it knows that it can get ones and it's not always hooked.
Yeah.
But you've just got you literally when you understand the liquid principle, the world is your oyster. Once you start understanding that you can fish it as a standalone attractor, that's the most important thing. And then you've got extensions from that. When I'm fishing for male carp, I use a particular, they call it in sea fishing rubber dub.
Yeah.
People don't use it in coarse fishing. But if you know you're fishing for male carp, that 46 pounder that I told you, that was probably one of the best looking fish I've ever caught, that was spitting out that grass, that came on rubber dub. And this will make you laugh. This is how lucky.
You mean like rubber dubby, like a chum trail?
Yeah.
So, but this is with liquids, not with bits of fish?
Or
with bits of fish?
This is bits of fish.
Oh, right.
Bits of fish and liquid. Takes it down. That's what they come for, because they feed on fish.
Of course, and you're talking about male carp again.
Exactly. So what happens is this is how lucky I can be. I was fishing for this fish, and I never do tuitions, but this guy had won a tuition with PB Product. Reg Harley's name was. Great guy. He likes Paul Weller.
Oh, yeah.
And he must be about 50, Reg, and he's got a feather cut. I'm joking. He gets out of the car and I'm like, hey, what's all this about? But lovely fellow. We spent some time together. And we did this tuition at Nuddock Wood, and which is North Lincolnshire. Yeah. And he to go home. Something happened to someone, bless him. And he to go home after a day. And I said to him, you know what? I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to catch this carp. And they're like, really? I said, yeah, you watch, I'll go and catch it. So I goes down, it lived in Deepins. I goes down to Deepins, and I got my 3 rods out and I got this chum out. And I'm busting for a slash. So I thought, I'll go for a wee. So I gets up from the bank and I goes round back of this tree, has a slash, does the do, comes and dips myself up here, goes and sits back down. This is no word of a lie. This is how lucky Mark Holmes can be. I sat there, looked out, and I've been sat there for about 30 seconds. It seemed longer, but only about 30 seconds. And I went, where's my right rod? And I'd had a take on the right-hand side, and it had pulled, and I'd got snag ears on a Delkim. It had pulled the rod off the rest and ended up in the reeds. So talk about, so I picked this rod up, no fish on, effing and jeffing.
Oh, no.
Cast out again on the same spot, sulking like mad. And I'm sat there, sulking like mad. And about, I don't know, a few hours later, off it rolled, and that 46 pound common.
On the dead bait.
But on, again, round all these dead stuff, mate.
So you were putting out while you were doing that, you were putting out like rubby dubby, so like chopped fish.
Yeah, in a ground bait situation.
Yeah,
in a ground bait situation. Again, if you think about it realistically, the method is an incredible way of catching fish. And if you think of the success the likes of Will Ray's and Steve Ring and Nick Speed, all these guys, these exponents have on it, it proves that that type of food item will go balmy for. So let's take it to its nth degree. All I do in carp fishing is make these large balls.
Yeah.
And again, they're just a fantastic carrier
That's right,
of all sorts of things. You can put, I was even putting, when I was doing the insect, after the spawn, then I go down the insect road. And people have seen me shows where I grind down insects and the crickets and stuff like that. But one of the things I've never told them about is how I put crickets in the lake so that they rise up off the bottom in the whole state. And that's by ground bait, where I put them in the middle in a PVA bag.
What, and then they come up through the water column?
Yeah. What I do is I put them in a little PVA bag, small flimsy PVA bag, about 4 or 5 of them, whole, and then I put a ground bait ball around them.
Out it goes.
Yeah, and I picked that up from my dad years ago when we used to go fishing for roach, where you'd make some bread ground bait, you'd make a round ball, you'd put your thumbprint in it, you'd put 6 or 7 maggots in the thumbprint, and then paste it back over and throw it in. We can do the same with any type of items. And the thing that's never worried me is having items of food come from the bottom of the lake to the top, because I'm not fishing deep waters. If I'm fishing 4 or 5 foot, I can often the times I'll see them come up.
Yeah.
Very much like when people use, when they use foam or nuggets to, protect the hook, they'll see it come up. It's exactly the same with food items. And sometimes you can see swirls underneath and stuff. I don't worry about creating a feeding situation where something's moving from the bottom to the top, because that's natural. What's unnatural is something moving from the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
The other thing as well, which is again is a forgotten art, is float fishing for them.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, float fishing was scorned fishing for carp because fish were used to line coming down from the top to the bottom in the water column. They're not used to it anymore because nobody float fishes.
No one does it, exactly.
So it's all on the bottom.
Yeah.
So float fishing is an incredible way of catching big carp because they're just not used to line. I've even had them come close in and they're brushing the line at the side of them. They're not scared of it anymore.
No.
So again, if people want to think about using insects and stuff, you can use them almost tench-like, where you're using the lift method, and provided you're fishing. All these methods, Hassan, are based upon reasonably close range tactics.
Yeah.
We're not talking about 80 yards. You know what I mean? This is all sort of 40 yards and in sort of work.
Yep.
And that's just because you can control the baiting situation easier. When you start going at long range distances, I don't think you can have the same effect unless, of course, you use a bait boat. And as I said, I don't use bait boats in any way, shape, or form. The other reason why I don't fish long range as well is I still think that the bite indication is dreadful.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. By the time you get some acknowledgement when you're fishing 150 yards away, mate.
Even on braid?
Yeah, even on braid. It's just, if you see the likes of Rob Hughes and these underwater experts, and they pick the bait up off the bottom and they're going like that, moving it about, and nothing's happening on your indicators. It is just so, it's amazing when we ever get a bite. And I always say to people, they always imagine that a carp goes from point A to point Z away from you. And it doesn't. It doesn't. How many times have we picked this rod up and you wind, and it's down here somewhere. And all that room that carp's gone down, it's been a hook fish.
Yeah. Just kited in the bobbins.
Yeah, it's just kited.
Yeah, definitely. What I wanted to do is bridge the gap between what we've been talking about, which is bait, and go into sort of a couple of standout captures. The first being a Chad Lake fish, just over 50 pounds.
52.6.
It taught me through that capture because it is pretty unique in terms of what it's caught.
It is unique. It's funny, there was quite a clamour to catch that fish at the time. It was just after Terry Hearn had done his Pursuit of Black Eye little DVD. So that would have been about 2008 stroke 2009. So what we're talking about 13 years ago. And I was on there with some good anglers, people like Alan Taylor, God rest his soul. Simon Mansbridge, who owned Badgers Alton, Surrey in France, was on there. And it was so funny. Nathan Bailey was on there. And this particular time, Mark Pitch was on with me. Wasn't fishing with me, but when I turned up, it was on the lake. And because it wasn't syndicate in them days, you could book it as well, which made it even harder. But anyway, I'm getting off the point. But it was funny because I'd turned up. I'd been chasing this fish about 6 months, and I'd had nearly all the big ones except black eye, and he was a stunning fish. And when people go on about fishing big waters or small waters, Chad Lake was exactly the same size. It was actually called Home Pool.
Yeah.
Chad Lakes is a complex, but Home Pool is exactly the same size as Redmire. So it's just over an acre. But he was literally, talk about Lord of the Manor. He knew, you could put a bait 1 inch away from the spot where he wanted it and he wouldn't take it.
Really?
That's the thing about small waters. You've got to be precise. So I'm watching it one day and I just knew, this was August time, so I knew that he'd had his fair fill of boilies and all the rest of it, and he was feeding on naturals. So I reeled my rods in and I thought, right, I need to have a recap here. So I'd not put a hook anywhere near him. And I thought to myself, I need to have a bit of a rethink here. And I drove from Chad, which is near Stow-on-the-Wold. I drove into Morton Le Marsh, which is in the Cotswold, which is the next village up from Stow-on-the-Wold. And they have a fancy supermarket there. Is it called Budgeons?
Budgeons, yeah.
Budgeons.
Budgeons.
Oh, you got a Bobatoo going Budgeons. I think they should call it Bobatoos, not Budgeons. But anyway, so I goes in there and there's some prawns. And I like seafood. So I got this tub of prawns. I got in the car and I ate this tub of prawns. And they were enormous, these prawns. And I got to about the last one and I looked at it and I thought, I bet I could catch him on one of these. Because it was quite large and it was curled. So it wasn't like, it looked almost like the natural state. If I could have bought one in a shell, I would have done, but it didn't. It was these budgie ones. So I went back in, bought another one. And I called at Shipton Lestour for a cup of tea with Simon Mansbridge, who were working at home. And I said, look, I've got an idea. I said, what? I said, I'm going to go back to Lexington and I'm going to catch him on a prawn. What? So I'm going to catch him strep pegging on a prawn. Oh. Anyway, goes back to the lake. And I saw him, for about an hour I watched him and he's feeding the margins. So I strategically placed 6 prawns spaced out in the margins. And when I mean in the margins, I mean a foot front bank. So under butt ring when you put it on rod rest. It was incredible. And I set up a float fishing system, but it was strep pegging. Now, those who don't know what strep pegging is basically, it was a method used on rivers, which is to fish tremendously over depth. So if you imagine having a geometry lesson, an A being the bottom, B being the top, and C being an extension of the top, what you do is instead of having your line go from A to B, it goes from bloody A to C. So it has a big bow in it, and you fish with the float just slightly cocked.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, what I did was I set up and lowered it down into the margins, 6 inch from the edge, and I actually laid the line on the grass swim of the rod, and I put the rod at the back of the swim, and I sat on the footpath, the other side of the fence. So there's about 3 rod lengths of line laid on grass, and then there's the float in the edge, and I'm sat on the footpath around the back. And Mark Pitchers were going past me, be about 7 o'clock at night. And he's going past me to get some more water from his van. And he says, Holmes, what are you doing? I said, I'm strep pegging. And I think Mark thought it was some sort of sexual connotation or something. I don't know. He says, what? I said, I'm strep pegging. What do you mean? And I remember I pointed at him. I pointed like that and I went, you see that there? I said, see me float? And he went, Jesus, yeah. I said, I'm float fishing for it. He said, what are you doing? I said, I've seen him moseying about. I said, I'm fishing for him with a prawn. And he said to me, I'll never forget, he went, you're joking? I said, no. And I'm not joking. This isn't rehearsed to make this have more impact. But I'd no sooner said that than there was this enormous swirl, like an enormous swirl. Never even saw the float go. This enormous swirl. And I looked and there's no float. So I jumped up, bang. This fish screams off and I'm playing this fish. And those of you that know Paul will know that Dave Ayres, the owner, has his house quite near the lake.
Yeah.
And it's a 2-story building. Well, this isn't a joke, this is true. As I'm playing this fish, Dave opens the bathroom window, and I'll never forget, he's got half shaving cream on his face. So no shaving cream here, but half shaving cream here. And he leans out, and I'll never forget, he shouted top of his voice, Holmes, you don't want to lose this, you've got him on.
Oh, cheers, man.
And I was like, because it had white tips on its tail, and I was like, oh my God. And I'm playing this fish, so don't forget, I've got a rod and I've got a float on, and it's in weed, and it's not a sliding float, it's a fixed float. So I'm playing this fish, and I've got marked pictures. It's on it. It's at the side of me. And I'm thinking, if this drops off, I'll never recover. And I'm playing this fish. And this is what I mean about the luck aspect of fishing. It kited to my left towards this banking of silkweed or non-filamentous weed, that stuff that's not rooted, that's like cotton wool. And it got around the float, tangled around the float. So I'm playing it and I'm thinking, oh God. And as the fish is going on a strong run to my left and I pulls back, the line went past the weed went past the float and started going down the line towards the fish's face. And I remember, because I've done this so much, don't forget there's no lead or swivel or anything to stop it. Mm-hmm. The hook's in its mouth. You know, it's the days of striking for a living. You know, the hook's actually in its mouth. So I'm thinking to myself, if that weed comes down with too much force from a straight line, with my rod up, it could knock the hook out. So what I did was I kept the rod low and it came down really slow. And eventually it came down and it enveloped the fish's face. And as it went over the fish's face, the fight just stopped. And I just walked back, because the fish couldn't see what it did. Just walked back and Mark Pitchers netted it. And it was just absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. He was jumping up and down. I was jumping up and down. And I'll never forget, Gareth Pennell was writing for one of the local papers, and I think he'd some mates still at, I think Richard Lee was still the editor of Angling Times, and he got in touch with me, did Richard Lee, and told me, could we do it? I said, no, I'll send you a picture. But when I sent the picture in, he made a big thing in his editorial, and I thought it was being a bit frivolous, but he put, you don't need boilies to catch big carp. Yeah. And it was the prawn that did it. And it was so funny, because loads of my mates started fishing prawns for carp, and all they ever caught were perch.
Perch, yeah.
And I said to a few of them, I said, look, what you got to understand is, like all these things, it's not selective. No. I said, I caught that particular fish in that style on that night because it was picking up, without a shadow of a doubt, it picked the 5 up before it got to that. And it was, and I think, but I don't often praise myself, because I'm very wary of praise. I'm very wary of criticism. I'm very wary of praise. But as I'm getting older and uglier, I look back at that capture and I do think to myself, well done, Holmesy.
Yeah, right outside the box.
Yeah, that was, yeah. And I think, I don't know, but I think Steve Pagliata's told me it's the biggest carp ever caught on a float in the UK. 52.6.
Can well take that.
And that was 2009. So it's a few years ago. So yeah, job done, mate.
That's a serious fish.
I never went back either.
Yeah, well, you don't after that,
no,
do you? That's the one, isn't it?
It was enjoyable time, mate.
Yeah.
It cost me a lot more than people realise. I took my eye off business and all sorts of other things. But it was probably the last fish that got under my skin. I often say to people that when you target fish, you have to prepare your brain for a lot of pain, because when you're not there, you think it's going to be caught. If you lose a fish, you think it's that fish. When you are there, you're thinking, I'm in the right place. When you're not there, you're thinking you should be there. It can literally take over your life. Yeah. So all I'm saying to people is that targeting fish is all well and good, but just steel yourself for a bit of pain.
From that, which is 50-something pounds, to one slightly bigger that was caught probably, what are we talking, 250, maybe 300 yards down the path at the back there in the Cops Lake.
June 2006, so what's that, 15 years ago?
Is that 50? Oh, God.
15 years ago, isn't it? 61.4, 15 years ago. That puts into perspective how big that fish
That's
was.
massive, yeah.
It was massive. And again, I was right place, right time. I'm not going to bore people with all. It cost me a lot. A lot of people had to go at me for catching it.
Well, in what regard?
In jealousy. You know what it's like. Carp fishing, when they're really, really, really big, brings out two types of people. The guy that wants to congratulate all the time and the guy that wants to pull you to bits. And unfortunately for Kevin, as I suffered myself in my own pond, when you have your own pond, you get people, it's his own pond, it's his pets, he hand feeds him, he does this, he does that, the wrong uns are this, that. It's nonsense. They got no idea about the history and all the rest of it. And to be fair to Kevin, he gave me an opportunity there that I'll always be grateful for. And I always thought, and I do even more so now, that it was just a moment in time. It was a moment in time where I was afforded an opportunity to do something, and I did it. And it was a part of a process that made me realise that I can catch anything. I went away from that little DVD that we did here, realising that the most important part of catching big fish is having the ability to land them. It's hard enough to put a hook in them, but your luck stops when the hook's in them. When people say to me, you say it's time and access, can you quantify that? I say, yeah, it is time and access, but your luck stops when that buzzer goes. Then you need to keep it together, because once you know what you've caught, and I'll give you a little example. That fish was caught during a filming project that we did with Nick Reed, who later became Carp TV and all the rest of it. Lovely, lovely bloke. And whilst we were trying to get a fish for the DVD, he had to go home for his tea because his batteries had worn down. And whilst his batteries had worn down, I got a take, and it was so funny. I get this take, and this fish set off. And when a fish sets off, and you think you should have netted it when it was sluggish and in the margins.
Yeah, when it didn't know what was going on.
Didn't know what was going on, but this fish woke up. And I remember this fish going off on a run. And he was going off on a run, and it was going to the end of this island. And all I had to do was turn left, and it had done me, or turn right, and it had done me. But for some reason, it stopped, turned around, and came back towards me. And I'm winding down, and Dave Levy was fishing with Mark Rush at the time.
Yeah.
And Dave came running on the bank, I'll never forget, came running on the bank, and he said to me, Holmesy, you don't want to lose this. He said, this is a fish called Sky you've got on. And I said, how big was it last time, Dave? He said, mid-50s. And it was my first UK 50, by the way. This was 2006. And I remember...
What did you have it on? Was it off the deck, just on a boilie?
No, I got it on a PVA bag. Little PVA bag. And I never forget, the guy that was with me was trying to net it, and Dave just pushed him out of the way, got the landing net, and in typical Dave Levy, paratrooper, just jumped in the lake.
Yeah.
Straight up to his chest and in the net. And it was 52-2. So we rang up Nick Reed.
Oh, because he was,
and said, Nick, great news, we've got one for the film. He said, well, I'm just having my tea now, lads, and battery's charging, so we'll have to do it another time. Put phone down.
We'll have to do it another time?
Yeah. And I was like, what? Now, this is about luck. If Nick would have come from his house, it was only about 20 minutes away, and filmed that 52, then that would have been project done. I would never have got a chance to fish the lake again for the 61.4.
So you came back at another occasion? They weren't both in the same session?
Came back at another occasion. And, cut a long story short, I was very, very lucky. It was like, I even got, bless him, the guy that was with me, Richard Farnham, he actually put a floating peanut, he hooked the floating peanut on for me. And I had this 10-foot century rod, and unbelievably, the butt ring, the inner bit had come out, the inner section. And as I cast this thing out, it's rattling around. I thought, I look, all right, plant pot here. But anyway, this fish took it. And all I can remember when I was playing the fish was this lad with me was telling me, it's a British record, we could see this fish clearly. I'm playing this fish. And it was a size 10 hook.
So it's literally a free-lined floating peanut?
Not on a bubble float.
On a bubble float?
Right, so bubble float cast out.
Right, okay.
Right, and it took it, and I remember I could see the peanut in its mouth here.
Oh, no.
And I'm playing this, and there's a big microphone over the top of me. There's this camera in my face, and I'm on a 10-foot rod, right? 10-foot rod. And I'm playing this fish, and I'm thinking, if this falls off, I will never recover. And when I mean never recover, I mean I'll never recover. I knew it was the biggest fish I'd ever seen, let alone caught. So I'll never recover. Anyway, it didn't fall off. And it was so strange because we kind of bundled it into the net. And I'll be honest, I thought it was bigger than it was. I thought it might have been a British record at the time. I mean, it was the biggest one. I think it's still the biggest one ever caught off the surface. But it was 61.4. And it was a fish, strangely enough, that I'd seen Dave Levy caught it. It was Dave Levy's personal best for a lot of years at £50 an ounces.
Wow.
And again, this is what I mean about them trying to knock what Kevin has achieved and knock Kevin's stock and all the rest of it, saying they were foreign fish. They weren't. I got in touch with Nigel Sharp, and Nigel traced that carp down to Broadoak, and he got a picture of his friend with it at mid-30s.
Yeah.
And so all that bullshit about being a foreign fish, it wasn't. And again, it was just a moment in time. And it caused me a lot of problems because a lot of people were trying to make more mileage out of it than they should have done. They were trying to think I were going to be big-headed and everything. I mean, I'll give you an example. It appeared on the front cover of Advanced Carp Fishing, but only in November. So I'd gone from June, July, August, September, October, and it was just, and at that time, that kind of disappointed me, and I felt a bit sad about the rancor and the upset. But now, here we are, 15 years on, and I look at that, and that's up there with my highlights of my fishing career. Just a moment in time.
I was going to ask you, where do you rank them? What's your best capture for you, if there is such a thing? Because you've had loads. I mean, the amount of 40s and 50s.
The Cambridgeshire Black Mirror.
Is that the best? The pinnacle?
41.5. Not the linear. It was the same water where the linear were in. And
why is that? Why does that stand out?
Because it's just quite simply the most jaw-dropping fish you've ever seen. Imagine a fish as black as these headphones.
Yeah.
And a 40-pounder that don't come out very often. It hadn't been out for like 4 years. And the thing that got me was that particular water, if you had 8 or 9 fish in a year, you were doing well. In one session, I had 14. And that was the 14th fish. I couldn't believe what was happening. And I'd got that place so sussed. I was in 85-pound braid.
85-pound braid catfish tackle.
Mate, you could literally walk on it. The weed was that bad. And I was using a fledger. I was fishing with a bait on top of the Canadian pondweed. Not in it or not on a hole, on top of it. And it was a fledger which went down really slowly. And what happened is it went down like that and it laid on top of the weed. And I used pink food baits so I could watch the carp picking the pink food baits out of the weed. Because the bank where I was fishing, the trajectory was high. So I would watch them and I watched them taking the pink hook baits. And I devised a system where all my hook baits were pink, so that I could see when each one had gone. Honestly, great piece of angling. And of course, I went on to catch. I had a 44 common and a 38.5 in one session. I had probably the best looking male carp I ever caught, called the Tench at 39.12. I'd got the Caravan Park Linear, which I caught at 52.5. And I caught it on the Tuesday, and then I caught it on the Friday. I had the Black Mirror from there. So that's up there. And also the Knotford fish. The Knotford fish. It was so funny. We went there, me and my friend Bob, and it was the first time I'd ever fished it. And I got in this peg, and I never use a marker float. I just use a bale head.
Yeah.
So I throws this bale head out, and there's a weed bed in front of me. This weed bed extended for two rod lengths. That was the width of it. It was 15 wraps out. You were clear. Then he went to 16 and 17. It was full of weed. And then 18, bit clearer. Then 19 and 20, completely clear. Then 21, full of weed. So there was 2 weed beds and there was a strand of clear by them both. And what I always do is, I thought I'll fish, not the spot that everybody fishes, which is the furthest one away. I'll fish this one. Then I'm only going over one weed bed.
Yeah.
And I put my rod tips up in the air. And it was so funny. I'd never had a fish from there. I'd never fished there. It was the first day I fished there. Turned up at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and at 6 o'clock at night, left-hand rod goes over and eats this fish. Bob comes over and I'm playing this fish. And Bob said, is it a decent one? And I remember playing it thinking, there's no fish in here big enough to be doing this to me. Honestly, it was like plodding about. And I thought to myself, no, they're not that big in here. And then I gets it close to, and then it kind of rolled. And Bob, bless him, just looked at me and looked away. And I went to net it, and he said, you net it, not me.
Yeah.
And then I thought that's something special. And I netted it. And I looked down and I picked it up and I said to Bob, I said, it's a good 30. And Bob came along, just lifted up the net and went, stop talking nonsense, that's mid-40 all day long. And we clambered it on board, and it was 44.8. And bless him, there were a lovely lad on there, a lad called Doug Hill, had been on there, and he came over and had a look at it and that. And I'll be honest, I felt a little bit embarrassed that I'd caught it.
Yeah,
some of the lads had wanted to catch it on there. It was the biggest fish in there. But that, for the pressure that lake gets, and it's 50 quid a year. That's all to fish it. That's up there, and also the £50 Yorkshire common.
Yeah,
because it's Yorkshire.
Yeah,
that was that meant a lot. Did that? I think I told you in the space of 3 weeks, I caught the 44.8 from a club water.
Yeah,
I caught £50 13-ounce common from a Yorkshire day ticket, and I caught a 46 Lincolnshire syndicate one in 3 weeks from 3 different waters. And I just thought to myself, could you imagine the great and good of angling if they'd have caught that? They'd have been on the front page of Daily Mirror. So sometimes I just take a little bit of I try not to be egotistical, because it's a trait in people that I don't particularly like. But I must admit, I sit back now, and it's over a year ago, but I sit back now and think, good arrows, Mark.
That is, from that venue as well, the Yorkshire Day Ticket 50, it's not an easy venue in the slightest. Talk me through that capture in terms of tactics and how you went about it, because there's a lot of people fishing that Day Ticket venue.
Well, to be fair, I'd done something completely different. I'd gone onto a 3.5 foot trace.
Really?
3.5 foot. Yeah, honestly, if you ask people like Ricky McGee and Bob Milne and one or two others on there, when they saw it, they were like, what is he doing? I mean, this long trace.
That's long.
Long trace. And a long air and a big 22mm boilie. And I'll never forget, people...
That is big.
Yeah, big fish tactics, yeah. And I just thought to myself, because when I first went on there, first week, it's got a massive undertow. So I went on with 2.5 ounce leads and they're moving about.
It's deep as well, isn't it?
34 foot deep.
Yeah.
So it's 34 foot deep, 40 acres. Ain't an easy breeze. And I literally gets a run at 1 o'clock at night. Laid in the bag. Wee! 1 toner. Yes, I'm in the money. Straight down, playing this fish. Oh, 20 pounder. All right, okay, yeah. Puts it back. Get it back out. Gets it back out. Yeah. Gets back in bag. No sooner got back in bag and we're on zip. Wee! Off again. What the straight down, yeah, playing this fish. Oh, yeah. Nets it. Oh, that's about 20 pound as well. Just putting it back. So I'm just putting it back. I've got my torch on the third setting, them Ridge Monkey torches with third setting, so it's not too bright. And I just saw the tip of the right-hand rod just go round an inch. No bleep. Just the tip go around, but it was like a barbel bite. It went round and stayed. So I put the torch on an iron beam so I could see the line in the water, and the line lifted up like that. And I watched the line lift up, and then I saw the tip go again, and I thought, that's a fish. Bang. And that was the £50 common. And when I say fight, you could not... It was unbelievable. The fight.
Mental.
Absolutely. Well, just... Oh, and when I saw it in the torchlight, and I saw the width... You've seen some pictures of the width of it, haven't you?
Yeah, it's an absolute chunk.
It's just an absolute... And I remember thinking, please don't fall off.
Oh.
And when I netted it, and I tried to bring it on the shore, I've got arms like 2-part drives, you know what I mean? I'm not exactly Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm like Arnold Lever. and I couldn't get it on the bank. And I remember thinking, my God, Yorkshire, and that's a big. And what made it so? It was £50, 13 ounce. And what I got such a buzz from was my good friend Simon Crow sent me a picture of when he'd had it from Willows at like teen fish, or I think it was 19 or something like that. And he said, "Hey, Holmes," he said, "that's to stop the knob jockeys saying the big imports." He said, "Stick that in the pipe." And it was. I must admit, I got that. So that's up there, Hassan.
That's a mega fish.
Yeah, it is a mega fish, mate. Yeah,
unbelievable. So many big fish. I mean, are you as passionate and want it as much as you do now as you did then, or has it waned a bit? Because things have changed, mate. You've been through not only the change in terms of angling, but also the change in terms of the industry you work in, positions you've been in, and just the whole sort of landscape of things. Is it tarnished it, or is it still just as sort of you got as much drive as ever before?
I've probably got as much drive as ever. That's what can lead me to getting into scrapes, because when the blinkers come on, I'm totally focused.
Yeah.
One or two lads who've been fishing with me will tell you, my first day I'm horrendous because I've had no sleep. So when I turn up downside and I've had no sleep, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to see anybody. I just literally get my spots, bivvy door up and lay there for 24 hours. Then I come round and then I'm a little bit more conversant, and then it's right, let's go to work. Because I'm going to work. I know it sounds daft, because people, even when I didn't do it as a job, I was always going to work. That's why I tend to fish by myself, me against the fish. And I always have thought of it that way. And I still get, what I love more than anything is that buzz of when they're in the net and I lift the net. And I'm thinking, my God. I mean, fishing has taken me to places that money can't buy. That's all I say. I don't want people throwing up when I say this, but it has been the greatest thing to save me from myself, because I can be quite self-destructive. I can be quite depressive if I think about things, overthink things, but fishing has allowed me somewhere to park all of those emotions, and when I'm feeling down, it has the ability to pull me back up. Sometimes I'll sit there if I'm going through a lean spell of fishing and bemoan my luck, and then I'll have a cup of tea and I'm out in the open and the birds are tweeting, and I think of all the years I used to be sat in an office with a shirt and tie, busting me nuts for next to no. And I think, my God, Mark, these are the years when you need to think, I'm enjoying myself. What have I got? 10 years. I'm 59 now. I've got probably 10, maybe 15 years left. Last 5 years, someone's going to be wiping my ass. So I've got probably 10 years. I've probably got 10 years left.
What a positive way of looking
Yeah,
at it.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I've got, 10 years left. So I need to make those 10 years rinse as much happiness. And I know it sounds daft, but I get a real buzz out of helping people with the fishing. Some of the best PMs I've had these last 2 or 3 years have been from when people have said, Holmesy, I took on board what you said about these tactics, and this is what I've caught.
Yeah.
This is what my son's caught. This is what I've caught. Blah, blah. I love that, mate. Because at the end of the day, I'd rather be known as a nice bloke who caught a few big fish than an absolute arsehole who caught a load of fish.
That's a legacy, isn't it? What you do for others.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt.
One aspect we haven't talked about, but a different element to sort of your big fish makeup, is your own fishery.
Yeah.
In Warwickshire. And you are chairman, my cap, chairman, of a big angling club in Yorkshire, mate.
I am, mate, yeah.
Those two aspects, how did the fishery come to be? Is it the dream that everybody thinks it is?
Well, no, to be fair, I'd and it's well documented, you know, I'd had fisheries before Lakeview, as it became known in Warwickshire. And I didn't want to live there. I wanted to live at this lovely place near Craven Arms, which is in Shropshire. Yeah. But my wife found this lovely place and blah, blah, and it's got loads of lands and it's got a lake and blah, blah. And I was kind of in between what I wanted to do. So I won't say the fire was burning bright for me to have my own fishery, but I did get a buzz out of the kids fishing it, and I didn't bother. And I never forget, I'd had it 6 months, I'd never wet a line there. And I thought, the lads were going down with maggots and that. I've had some rudd, and they were catching nice rudd, the little lad. He was about 8 years old. And I thought, I'll go down with some sweet corn. So I'm catching nice roach, and 215 what biggest roach I caught. Oof. So proper big ones, catching these nice roach, and all of a sudden, bang. Oof. £21 carp on float tackle. Oh, this is all right, isn't it? And then it got a stage where every time I went down from about the last 3 hours of darkness and fish corn, bang, caught a carp. All about 18 to £22. And then I thought, I wonder if they'll take boilies. Well, I couldn't get a rod in the water. Absolutely could not get a rod in the water. Nothing massive. I think the biggest was probably 23, 24.
That's a good fish.
Yeah, it was a good fish. But what I managed to do was I destocked the lake, and the first net that we put through, are you ready for this? We took £3,500 of roach and rudd and bream out of 4 acre lake.
That is some biomass.
That is some biomass. So these fish, my biggest achievement was probably taking the first carp I had out, which was £21.
Yeah.
And when I left the lake, it was 52.
Oh, you beauty.
And that was from I'd taken that from 2004 to 2009. So in 5 years, I'd taken it from 21 to £50. Now then, lots of what I did, I'd got information from Kevin Nash. I'd got information from Bruno Broughton. I'd got good information from people that had done themselves. Kevin was doing a great job with his lakes in bringing fish that a lot of people thought were established fish and then getting that extra spurt. And that's what will happen if you move a fish from one lake to another, particularly if you get the ecosystem right. And I think even Kevin's worst detractor will tell that the lake work is done. They are havens for nature.
Yeah.
So he's got, and some of the tips he gave me, like liming the lake and stuff like that. These big fish that are in Kevin's lakes are not there by accident. They're there by design. And I very quickly learned that fishery management is that.
Yeah.
But you then have to make a decision. I remember Dave Moore, a good friend of mine, said, do we want to make these 50s into 60s, Holmesy? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, what if we start taking out the 30s and high 30s? But I'd had enough then.
Yeah.
Because, again, what happens is, and you shouldn't let it affect you, but the negative vibes that were coming back from people every time they saw one of these fish, it's his back garden, they're imported fish. And it really did annoy me that people who had no idea about the place would have a pop at me. And then even worse, when people did have a pop at me, those that had fished it, like Coulson, like Richard Stewart, like John Bones, not one of them said, I've fished that lake. It's not as easy as you think. They just left me alone. And again, that was probably me being too trivial in thinking people would stick up for you. But I learned a very important lesson that when people start giving you stick, you judge your friends by people that will stick up for you. And they left me to flounder. And it was only the fact that I'm quite a vociferous type of character who bit back and said, right, everybody, let's have the truth about this lake. Here's the stock. Here's how it's grown. Here's this. Here's that. Here's that. And then they went quiet. But here's the important thing. If you don't say anything, sometimes people think silence is compliance. So people can make a derogatory remark about Kevin Nash's lake. They've never even seen him. They've got no idea about the history of the stock, no idea about the history of the lake, but they'll make some flippant, stupid remark. Fortunately, I went I wrote an article which appeared in Carp World, and I knocked it all on the head. But it left a sour taste in my mouth by the fact that people, if the boat was on the other foot, like if people started haranguing Kevin's lakes, irrespective of whether me and Kevin have had words over years or fallen out, whatever, nothing to do with that. I would always stick up for Kevin because of what he's done with those lakes. People saying that they're all zinc down, that the pet fish, that this or that, they've got no understanding. They've absolutely no understanding because they've not fished it. They've no idea that he once had syndicates on these lakes, because it doesn't fit their genre. What they want to do is they want to say that Mr. Big, whoever Mr. Big is, whether it's Kevin Nash or Mark Holmes has got these pets and he can just go down and hoik a 40-out-foot cameras. Got no understanding of it. So it left, I'd had my time when I sold it and moved on. I was in a bit of a shit state physically. I had to have a knee replacement. So I had like 45 acres of this estate, couldn't cut the grass and all. So my time was done. But what I will always say to people, and I get a wry smile, that back garden pond fishing, noddy, all that sort of shit, happened about 2009. Look at my fishing track record since 2009 from non-back garden ponds. Where are those from? Where are these detractors now? Firmly in the box, saying no, just calling me names. You know what I mean? And it's that gets me. And that's why I can't help myself. I hate bullying of any nature.
Yeah, you said that.
You know, and I've said it for a long time. I hate bullying of any nature. And this is why, although it's not my type of fishing, the right of people to go anywhere and do what they want to make themselves and their family and the kids happy, let them crack on. I no more want to go fish a water that's got 50s that were stocked in there on Monday and people are fishing it Tuesday. I'd no more want to do that and cut my nuts off, but I will fight for the right for people to do what they want. How dare someone else impose their regulations on someone? And that's where I see still a problem with some of the fishing. We've got to get away from this snobbery. And I'm not blowing smoke up Nash's backside or Shimano's backside, but Shimano's a global company, as Nash is a global company now, and we've got to accommodate for the masses, not the select few. Yes, hopefully we'll bring the select few on, but at the end of the day, it's not a snobbery business, it's a fun business, and if we can get kids involved in it at an early stage, it's not only good for the sport, it's good for them, it's good for their mental health, and it teaches them good life skills, and that to me is where carp fishing has changed.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, too right.
The life skills that were associated with carp fishing when I got involved were dreadful because you became antisocial, you became a dropout, you became unemployed, you became ugly, you became old, and you became fat. My missus says to me, why are carp anglers fat, bald and old?
Fantastic. I look forward to that venture. I'm going to lose the hair, mate. That's all I've got. No, but I know what you mean. Stereotypically, that is definitely how it's perceived.
Yeah.
An interesting spell there.
Mm.
It's been an absolute education for me. I didn't know in depth this much about you, even though I'd spent some time with you fishing.
I know,
but there's some incredible captures, some incredible sort of insights into your mind, especially bait and how different approaches for different fish. But I've really enjoyed it. Before you go, though, you have to answer the old Nash 10 quick fire questions.
Sure, mate. Yeah, fire away.
I'm pretty sure I know the answer to some of these.
Right, okay.
As ever, I've got to find them, mate, because I can never remember them. Right, you ready?
Yep.
UK 50 or foreign 70?
Oh, all day long, UK 50.
Bait boat or baiting pole?
I don't like either, but I'll say baiting pole.
Nice. Would you rather experience carp fishing 20 years ago or 20 years in the future?
20 years ago.
Dawn or dusk?
Dusk.
Never use a shelter again or never use a bed chair again?
Never use a bed chair again.
Be a professional angler or a professional footballer?
Professional angler.
Always torrentially raining when you're fishing or always 30 degrees and sunny?
Always torrential raining.
Would you rather catch 10 20-pounders or 140 in a session?
140.
Oh, what a big fish. For the rest of your life, you can only listen to drum and bass or country and western.
You'd be surprised. I am actually a bit of a techno lad, you know.
I can see it in the eyes,
Mate,
mate.
let me tell you, at the moment, there's a song called We've Lost Dancing. If you get chance, listen to it. It's called Lost Dancing, and it's by Fred Said.
Okay, mate.
All right. James Armstrong does it on his Instagram feed, that music in the background.
Does he?
Yeah, so I'm going to go for drum and bass.
Drum and bass?
Drum and bass, mate, yeah.
Holmesy on the drum and bass.
Oh, yes.
Hold tight, Yorkshire. In a bucket or dig a hole?
Dig a hole, mate.
Deep in thought there for a minute.
Dig a hole, mate, yeah.
Would you rather fish a 2-week session without changing your socks or a 2-week session without changing your underwear?
Oh, it's got to be without changing my socks.
Hook bait colour choice, bright or match the hatch?
Although, funnily enough, when you get to my age, you can nearly tuck your bollocks in your socks. So kind of one and the other means the same thing, you know.
Mate, it's a warm day out there too, mate. Where has he gone here, Andrew? I'm just looking at also whilst I'm doing these questions. I'm just looking at my plan. Lovely strategic order. I'm gonna watch this back on the edit later, and I've got bits from this section here, but I'm just gonna put it out as it is. It's been absolutely brilliant, mate. I've enjoyed the madness of Holmesy. Hook bait colour choice, bright or match the hatch?
Oh, match the hatch all day long. Ooh. All day long. All day long. Let me tell you, there's a lot of nonsense spoken about bright hook baits. What attracts them is also a danger signal. You'll catch more fish with bright hook baits, but you won't catch the big ones.
Oh, yeah. You said that to me before. I remember that categorically. Camo or olive?
Camo.
Last question. Date night with the missus or hit the lake on the end of a big pressure drop and a fresh southwesterly?
Oh, all day long, date night with the missus.
Mark Holmes, thank you so much for coming in, mate. I've really thoroughly enjoyed that. I know the viewers would have too. There's loads of information in that. Might have to listen back to it 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 times. If you're watching or listening, please subscribe and make sure you drop us a review. A massive thank you again, mate, and hopefully we can get out the bank soon.
Brilliant. I look forward to that. All right, son, you take care, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, buddy. Thanks.